Chapter 21 Psychic Duo. My first lesson in the basics of safely using psychic powers should be happening soon. It was kind of exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. I was wondering if I had talked too much in my session with Inquisitor Thaberus when someone knocked on the door of the meeting room. It opened and Acolyte Herlindia entered. "Lady SYRINE," she bowed, "the Psychers you have requested to have a word with have arrived." Psychers? More than one person? No matter. I might even get more advice. "Thank you, Miss Herlindia. Please let them in." I replied while trying my best to be courteous and caught her subtle expression of being surprised first followed by a faint smile. Was she astounded by the fact I remembered her name? Having the photographic memory of a Primarch really helps in scoring easy social points. Due to all the happenings, it felt like a lifetime ago when she introduced herself meekly back in the inner sanctum. Herlindia bowed again and left. After that, two newcomers entered the meeting room. Without even looking at them, I knew they were Psychers because even without going psychically active myself, somehow unseen energies could be felt whirling around them. Not only were they Psychers, but these two were also in a different league compared to Aratus the Astropath. A man and a woman stood near the entrance and were looking at me. Both of them had similar pale skin and attire, wearing the Psyker robe with extra carapace chest and shoulder armor pieces. The man was carrying a thin staff, whereas the woman had a small psychic hood-like structure behind her collar. "Well, come in," I said while standing up and greeting them with a light bow. The man and woman nodded. Together they walked towards my table, slightly bowed, and proceeded to sit on the empty chairs available. "Greetings, I am SYRINE Fulton Merdini," the man replied with a soft voice. "This is my colleague Tsali Hennard. We are sanctioned Psychers in the service of the Holy Inquisition, currently assigned to Inquisitor Thorn." A swift analytica confirmed both their human and Psyker status as I took a closer look at them. They both appeared to be in their late 30s. The man was slightly below average height, had short white hair, and a face that could say to be uneasy. He gave off the aura of a tamed beast, controlled but dangerous. The woman was half a head taller than the man. Beneath an average-looking face was her unkempt waist-length blonde hair that hung lazily in front of her Psyker robe. The one common trait of appearance they shared was their hollow-looking eyes. My best description of their overall impression would be unhinged battle Psychers. While this might be just me stereotyping, these two definitely reinforced the notion of why normal people would be uneasy near Psychers. "Inquisitor Thorn mentioned you would like our advice. Well, we are here," Fulton said, then stopped talking, looking at me with his unnerving gaze. Truth be told, I was not exactly feeling easy talking with them, but I had a much greater fear of being possessed by a demon or worse, being turned into a chaos spawn down the road. The very notion that such a possibility existed sent ice-cold chills down my spine. So despite my trepidation, if I ever had to rely on psychic powers, I had to consult the real professionals. Plus suddenly a female voice was heard communicating telepathically. Plus I got nothing. Plus replied a male voice. Looking at them, I realized they were chatting through telepathy. "Did Inquisitor Thorn mention anything to you about me?" I asked. Fulton shrugged and Tsali answered with her hoarse voice. "We were bedridden for days after arriving at this accursed system and just got better recently." "I see. Well, I would like you two to brief me on the perils of the warp and teach me the knowledge of self-protection when using psychic powers." Fulton's eyes narrowed upon hearing my request. "Plus, what is the deal with her?" Plus Tsali asked in telepathy. "Plus, no idea. I will probe and see." Plus wait, Thorn introduced her. Is that wise? Plus. I then felt the slightest sensation of being probed, but it quickly fizzled out. "Huh." Fulton seemed startled, but his timing was so good, without knowing better it would be as if he was reacting to my request. Tsali shot him a glance, sighed sent telepathically. "Plus Fulty, don't be rude." Plus she resisted my probe. Plus wait, what? Are you getting rusty? Plus like hell I am. Plus, please, will you accept my request? Being probed without permission should have been considered egregious conduct on his part, but I decided to let his actions slide for now. Tsali replied this time. "Who are you, and why do you need such knowledge?" "Well, I too am a Psyker," I began explaining before being interrupted by Fulton. "Haha. You? A Psyker? I am sorry, little lady. Being requested by Inquisitor Thorn to meet with you is one thing. What you asked of us is off limits." He then stood up, approached me with an imposing stance, pressing his face close to mine, and spoke. "I don't know who you are, nor do I care, but we sanctioned Psychers do not indulge with the make-believe of the privileged, especially when it concerns matters dealing with the warp. Do you think this is a game?" One wrong move here and you with your entire whatever noble family lineage on this little god emperor forsaken rock can be wiped out without a trace. Do you hear me? Plus Sully, I will probe again. Aid me. Plus Fulton was apparently not satisfied with the previous attempt. Judging from what I just heard, she can buff him? Is this some sort of psychic choir technique? Interested in their technique, I shut up and just kept observing them. Plus she went quiet, very suspicious. Plus very well. Let's go. Plus. For a brief instant, I felt their powers connected and Fulton tried probing me again with greater intensity, but again it fizzled out. Plus I got nothing. This is not normal. Plus Fulton declared. Now that I saw their technique, I decided to show them my psychic active state to end this charade. Please, I know this is not normal, but I am a psyker. Let me show you. Psychona Activa activated. The now familiar trippy sensation took over me again. As expected, the two of them had a much stronger psychic resonance than Aratus in my active state. I could even detect a small linkage of their powers. That must have been the result of years of working together. Plus, do you get it now, Fulty? Plus, I joined the telepathic conversation. Both of them were stunned, especially Fulton, who was very close to me and had this derpy look on his face. In the next second, suddenly things took a dive as I sensed warp energies gathering around Fulton. Alarms in my head sounded as my thought acceleration activated automatically. Wait, is he trying to smite me? Smite was a generic psychic power in this universe in which the psyker unleashed the power of the warp in the form of otherworldly lighting energy to electrocute their enemies. I could see in slow motion the power gathering on the psyker as he charged up for what could be a fatal attack. Fulton. Sully called out to stop her companion, but the latter seemed lost in the motion. I needed to stop this from developing into a disaster and suddenly recalled that the warp energy seemed to respond to my will when I was psychically active. Standing up, I instinctively willed myself to disperse the energy gathering around Fulton. Reacting to my directive, the gathering storm dissipated like light smoke hit by a strong wind. Surprised, like me, by my successful denial of his powers, Fulton now had an even derpier look on his face as panic started to take over him, flipping my previous impressions of the psyker being the cool kid in class sort of person. Not wanting to risk another psychic attack, I put strength into my words and felt my inner might radiate outwards as I delivered a serious warning to Fulton. Mr. Murdini, stop. Something tangible burst forth from me. It even flipped the teacup on the table as my words echoed in the room, and what followed was dead silence. Fulton had fallen back and sat on the floor. Both psychers went still, looking at me like deers staring into headlights. Well, that was effective, but why are they looking so afraid? Looking closer at them, my transhuman eyesight picked up my own reflection on their irises. It would seem like my halo was leaking out and it petrified them. Hold on. Why is my halo active now? I quickly looked into my status and found out it was actually part of the feature in Regulus, which became available when becoming psychically active. I must have missed that the first time, as it was quickly dismissed after witnessing that terrible war vision. Please, my colleague was spooked. Sully found her voice and placed herself between me and Fulton. It was at this moment I caught more details from my reflection on the spilt decaf on the table. My halo looked and felt slightly different from the first time it manifested. It was more pronounced and had more weight to it. Looking closer at the reflection, I could even see the edges of it had a hint of red tint with an edgier outer glow. I guessed in my desperation to stop Fulton, my halo must have been cranked up to the maximum level. They each held up a hand as if blocking rays from the sun while holding hands with their free hand. Fulton was even hyperventilating. Am I being oppressive here in my current state? I am sorry. I apologized while deactivating my halo. Their relieved faces told me it was far from a pleasant experience. Fulton let out a breath of relief and proceeded to just lay down fully on the floor. Sully shot him a glance before commenting, "Plus told you that was a bad idea, plus." I sighed. This meeting had started on the wrong foot but was still salvageable, and going forward I will need to treat my future interactions with psychers very carefully. Plus, let us start again. I recently lost most of my memory. Would either of you kindly brief me on the perils of the warp and teach me the knowledge of self-protection when using psychic powers? Plus. Just then, my mind registered a flurry of encrypted Vox messages received by the fortress from the front line. Things were happening and we had little time to lose. Chapter 22 IT is starting. There was a weird tension in the air. I was not sure if that was because of my awkward initial interactions with the psychers or the looming rebel offensive that might be happening soon. Apparently, they had never met a psyker who can go on and off at will. And me going psychic active so close to Fulton with my level of power had triggered distressing memories of a past experience he had with some warp entity in a previous mission where he almost lost his life. He confessed the very similar feeling of being severely outmatched had triggered his out-of-control outburst. While that was not a valid excuse for him to lose control, I assured the psyker this matter will not be pursued further by me in the future. After receiving Fulton's profuse apologies, we went forward with the crash course. We proceeded smoothly on the lessons, silently agreeing to ignore the puddle of spilt decaf that served as a stark reminder of a disastrous close call. Just as things were going into high gear, my crash course with the duo psychers came to an abrupt end when Thabris interrupted the session with breaking news from the front. It seemed like the rebels would be starting their full offensive soon, and I would need to prepare for departure to the front lines immediately. My presence at the front line had become necessary as Christopher had calculated that my tweaking of the plan had made the data load required increase 20-fold. So he had rushed to build a device in close proximity to the front line that was needed to cut down the margin of errors. I already knew this was coming as a part of my consciousness was still connected to the Fortress machine spirit, and the spike of traffic and encrypted Vox messages did not go unnoticed. That said, I did benefit greatly from the brief interaction with the psychers. First, I had accidentally mastered the conjuration of my halo during the second activation. The halo was one way to radiate my psychic might, and it had so far proved useful to strike either reverence or fear into the Emperor's subjects. Second, I finally understood the basic concept of self-protection from the perils of the warp. The fundamental outline was quite simple. Think of the warp as the sea and warp users as the swimmers. A normal swim in shallow waters would normally be quite safe, and the chances of being eaten by a predator almost non-existent. Except in this case, sometimes the sea could come to you, so one needed to be perceptive to the currents. Then there were the other considerations like the mental fortitude of each individual when assessing the risk of warp taint while using psychic powers, but we simply do not have the time to dwell into the details today. When I had free time, more lessons would definitely be needed on this subject matter. I was on my way to my room for another change of clothes, one aimed to impress and hopefully help in getting the full cooperation from the governor's faction to make our grand trap successful. To that end, I had enlisted the help of Sister Dialogus Wellmana on that front since I had always been a fashion idiot. Wellmana had stayed behind as a liaison for the Sororitas as she was not of the militant order. I had her waiting for me at my room via Vox as I sped across the fortress' massive walkway. Halfway through my journey, I had a distinct feeling of being watched. Curious, I slowed down and noticed a security picked feed, a term they used for cameras here, was aimed at me. I let my mind sink deeper into the fortress network and confirmed my hunch. At the same time, my consciousness had reported to me there was another picked feed looking at the control room, which controlled the picked feed looking at me. So they even had a watcher watching the watchers. That's the Imperium for you. I tagged my mind into said picked feed and a view popped into my vision, showing a dimly lit room where two people were looking at a monitor. On its screen was yours truly focused close-up. The audio was also connected. "Is that the mystery guest?" one man asked. "I think so. All sorts of important people were flying in just to see her. Who do you think she is?" the other man asked back. "Throne knows. That knowledge is beyond our clearance," shrugged the first man. "But she sure looks pretty." "Wait, is she looking at the picked feed?" I had their attention and might as well use this convenient chance to test something. So I smiled, then instantly activated my halo and cranked it to maximum intensity. The two men in my overlapped vision panicked, moved back from the monitor, tripped over each other, and fell over in comedic fashion. Hilarious as it was, the brief testing of my halo effect seemed to indicate it could somehow permeate through live picked feeds, but its effectiveness remained inconclusive. How this was achieved was totally beyond me, but the Grimdark universe was a place where scrap codes that transmit warp-infested computer viruses exist, so the underlying principles might be the same. That my halo, like the Emperor's, which might be essentially a type of positively charged warp energy emitter that could work through live picked feeds, might not be that far-fetched of a concept after all. At any rate, it felt like a bad idea to leave a record of the incident, so I had my consciousness reach into the database of the fortress and erase the records on both ends. As I did so, I wondered how all this was achieved, as the computation happening in the back end must be enormous. I looked down at my hands and remembered all Primarchs were sentient weapons masquerading as semi-humans. Since that much was true, the same must be said of SYRINE. The fact that my consciousness now resided in such a body had implications that I had neither the time nor the will to deal with at the moment, so I shook off that uneasy feeling and hurried to my room. Sister Welmana was already waiting at the door of my room when I reached it. My senses detected her breathing quickened as I approached. Nervousness, anticipation, reverence. Somehow I could read her emotions like an open book, and it felt strange. Rarely, if ever, had I evoked such emotions amongst other people back on Earth. Of course, if our position was flipped and I was back to my old self, I would probably be a sweaty mess if a literal demigoddess approached me in private. She was about to bow when, Welmana, please teach me how to perform the proper greetings for high society in this world. Slightly stunned by my request, but quickly coming to her senses, Welmana performed the gesture in front of me. As expected of a proper scholar, her greeting looked flawless. The whole greeting gesture was a mixture of an old-fashioned curtsy which then progressed to the Aquila hand sign that was only performed by female members of high society on the planet. I committed her gesture to memory and tried performing it in front of Welmana. Let me see. Lower my head slightly, hold up the edge of the outer cape, extend my right foot behind the left, slightly bend the knees and then bring myself up, proceed to do the Aquila hand sign and raise my head. Too easy. The level of precision provided by this body had made such a sequence of actions too easy. Am I doing it correctly? I asked. Perfectly done. Welmana was looking at me with sparkling eyes behind her goggles. May I ask, why would you go that far to show respect? Her question prompted me to take a closer look at the scholar. Was she serious? Did she truly believe just because I had SYRINE's credentials that people would willingly do whatever I say? Or was this a thing in this universe? Or had I reached the age to throw out random wisdom? Being a member of the Sororitas, which was an organization of zealots, might have skewed her point of view on these matters. It is simple, I answered. Paying respect is free, and I believe it should always be paid whenever appropriate. It was not as if I was a typical 8-feet-tall Primarch with a legion of super soldiers numbering hundreds of thousands under my command. If that was the case, etiquette would literally be optional when dealing with the normal folks. I had to play to my strength to increase my odds of long-term survival going forward. We finished up and proceeded to the landing pad where Flame Raven was waiting. Welmana will be riding with me on the gunship for this trip to the front. The Externus sun had just broken through the horizon, and the morning wind made the scholar shiver as we approached the downed rear hatch of the flying fortress. I was curious as to why Welmana was shivering when the temperature felt just fine before a shocking realization hit me. All this while, I had been interacting with this world with the body of a super-level transhuman and had been taking a lot of things for granted. My mind was racing back to some of the minor details that happened since coming to this world. Like back in the Inner Sanctum when I was able to easily push Alicia off me despite her being suited up in power armor, and how the nameless sword was lighter than it seemed. So all that was because of my Primarch level of physiology? Am I losing my sense of humanity without even realizing it? Lady SYRINE? Welmana's concerned voice woke me up from my stupor. I had stopped walking, and she dared not walk in front of me. I looked at the scholar again and found her still shaking in the morning breeze. You are freezing. Let's get inside, I said and hastened my steps. Thabris was waiting at the rear hatch entrance. The tail ends of purity seals plastered on his shoulder pad were fluttering in the wind. Now that I think about it, that armored Capitan of his must be weighing like a helmet in a normal human's hand. Beside the Inquisitor was Ranter, the friendly stormtrooper. He was enjoying a low stub, its glowing ember end shining with the same intensity as the laser range-finder optic of his hotshot volley gun. Good morning, Mr. Ranter. While walking towards the gunship, I greeted the big guy who I had not seen for a whole day. Morning there, little miss. You are looking mighty fine today, he said while putting out his low stub and stepping aside to let us through. Thabris shot his retinue a side glance, took out a data slate and accessed something on it. He then passed the data slate to the henchman before dropping a comment. Ranter, I hereby permit you to read this document. Go through with it and update your etiquette when dealing with SYRINE effective immediately. Return this to me later. A puzzled Ranter took the data slate and started reading while Thabris greeted us with a nod. SYRINE, sister, follow me. As Welmana and I followed the Inquisitor entering the gunship, behind us came the surprised gasp of Ranter. I was greeted by the distinct smell of Flameraven's interior again. It was a sort of mix between an expensive car and an airline cabin. My mind could not help but think back on all the recent happenings. Everything felt like a lifetime ago, and the hardest day was still ahead. I reached out to greet the gunship's machine spirit. Flameraven, how are you? Fully operational and ready to serve. Authority. Being the authority, I might need to get used to that concept soon. Chapter 23 Final Preparation. A lot of people will die because of my actions today. That mental resolve was made as I was securely fastened to the harness of a chair inside the Flame Raven again as it sped towards the front line. Anxious about the looming military operations, I was not idle and had been ceaselessly using thought acceleration to review all the details and running simulations inside my head. Time itself seemed stretched from my point of view in this weird period. A short while into the flight, for lightning air superiority fighters appeared on our flight path and settled into formation to escort the gunship. This much was known because even as I sat quietly on my chair with no outside view, encrypted communication chatter between the fighters could somehow just be heard inside my head once I consciously tuned into it. Somewhat mentally exhausted from my relentless and ceaseless review of the pending operations, I decided to take a break and eavesdrop on their conversation. Lightning One, look at the huge gunship. Who is the VIP this time? Someone asked. No idea on that Lightning 3, but be on the alert. The command mentioned high possibilities of sneak attack, replied Lightning One. You serious, Lightning One? We are way back in the green zone. Say, any of you guys heard a rumor about the AA Manicores firing at an unknown target here recently? I heard it was some sort of cyber attack. Got a friend stationed near there, and he said all the rockets had been fired. Huh, ain't nothing gonna survive that kind of salvo. Someone laughed. Bah, I'd rather be in the front lines now teaching those darn rebels a lesson than escorting some unknown big shots, another replied. I heard the front is heating up, so you might just get your wish after this run, Lightning 4. Alert. Reading on Auspex, bearing 12 o'clock. That startled me and I tapped straight into Flameraven's Auspex readings. Sure enough, something appeared on the edge of the Auspex range. Detailed readings of the approaching aircraft from the gunship's sophisticated systems filtered into my head and one profile emerged. Archaeopter Stratoraptors. A cold and flat voice popped into the conversation. Lightning Squadron. This is Taraxii Prime Iota 47 of the Adeptus Mechanicus leading Stratoraptor Strikewing Alpha. We are here to add to the escort of gunship Flameraven. There was a pause. I guess the leader of Lightning Squadron was scrabbling to verify the identity of the new flyers. Roger that, Alpha. We just received updates from Strategic HQ on your arrival. Glad to have you with us. Your compliance has been noted. We will lead from the front. So the rumors are true. We have Cogs joining our side. Cogs was a derisive term used by some of the Imperials for members of the Mechanicus, the reason being Opus Machina. The emblem of their religious faith was a hybrid of human and cyborg skull in front of a mechanical cog. The Cogs sent their flyers too? Just who is it we are escorting? Lightning One. SYRINE. One of the most powerful people on the planet was addressing me, interrupting my eavesdropping operation. Due to the excellent soundproofing of the gunship's interior, it was even possible to whisper while in flight. Yes, Inquisitor? You have my sincerest apology for what happened with Fulton, though I must confess my reluctance to punish him severely for his transgression due to the need for his talent for the uncertainties ahead. That, and the very unusual circumstances of your unique ability to be able to go psychic at will. Admittedly, I should have picked up on that part earlier with all your interactions with the Psychers, so I must say sorry again for my shortcomings. An Inquisitor was apologizing to me due to the actions of his subordinates? He must be up to something. He paused for a bit, then continued, but Fulton did commit a grave mistake and nearly created a catastrophe. In the light of that, I would submit his fate to you after this war is over. His words prompted me to take a closer look at him. Is he throwing Fulton under the bus to save his own skin or bowing to SYRINE's background? I searched for my feelings and found myself harboring no ill will towards him nor the Psyker. In fact, in light of the competency they and the sisters had shown with rapid developments, my respect for the people of this universe had been steadily growing. No harm was done, I replied. Please don't get too hard on Fulty. I was partly to blame too for what happened. I am grateful for the lesson and advice he provided, and I look forward to another session with him and Celise soon. That should secure Fulton's well-being for now. Fulty, huh? He chuckled upon hearing my usage of the Psyker's nickname. I see you generally have a benevolent approach to issues. Is that supposed to be a compliment? Anyway, if your appreciation is real, please help me at the meeting to push my plan forward. By the way, what happened to Neandra? The assassin's absence was felt, and I was sure she was present at the fort in the morning. But in truth, I had an idea of where she had gone. Earlier in the flight, there was a sudden request from Cryptorer to utilize my authority for masking some of our aircraft to fly deep into the rebel-controlled territory. They must have confirmed the whereabouts of the rebel leader. Knowing this was the decapitating move we had agreed upon, I obliged, followed his instructions, and with the back-end connection he had somehow established in the rebels' hardware. took over the control of a whole Auspex network belonging to the rebels through the Flameraven's wireless connection. In what could be the litmus test for the whole operation, I observed through the readings as a group of aircraft from our side went further and further into rebel territory until they reached their destination without incident. One of those aircraft was a stealthy small strike craft that had the hallmarks of the Inquisition written all over it. That must have been where Neandra had gone. Let's see how Thabris is going to answer me. From what you told me, a total decisive victory seemed like the only way for this world to survive. I will protect the Emperor's domain to the best of my capability. As for Neandra, she took an opportunity to strike on critical targets. Is she a Calidus Temple assassin? I asked out of curiosity. The Calidus Temple was one of the 4 major temples of the Officio Assassinorum, a highly secretive agency of the Imperium of Man's government that employs transhuman super-assassins to do its work. The temple itself mostly employs female operatives due to its unique requirements. Thabris looked around before answering me. We were alone in a sectioned-off compartment, so our conversation being leaked seemed unlikely, but the mere mention of an Officio Assassinorum temple still seemed to make him uneasy. Throne, I hope you do not make a habit of talking about highly classified information so casually. Well, I smiled impressed, merely more for fun seeing a stern person like him getting stirred up. No, he answered reluctantly, it is a long story for another time. Suddenly, I became aware of the Flame Raven being targeted by a myriad of anti-air systems, and a flurry of IFF exchanges between systems soon followed. It seemed like we were near our destination. You? Needing social assistance? He actually laughed. So mean. I cannot fathom a scenario where that would happen. At any rate, I am sure the Sororitas present would not allow their holy daughter to be swarmed by the uncultured masses. You have no idea of the language they used to protest my solo interview session, as if I was in a position to bully one such as you. A while later, we landed and Thabris led the party towards the rear hatch. It was a crowd. We were with Ranter, Herlindia, Fulton, and Salee, with the additional sister Wellmana and Tech Priest Daedalid joining in as liaison for Sororitas and Mechanicus. I noticed the subtle nodding between Thabris and Fulton. There must have been some standard psychic security measures being carried out discreetly by them. The rear hatch of Flame Raven opened, and we were greeted by a small crowd. Standing in the front was Interrogator Amael, flanked by Palatine Alicia and a decorated-looking female Scutarius who I did not recognize. Behind them were 3 small groups of people. Inquisitorial goons-looking gunmen with extra soldiers standing at ease right behind Amael. The same group of sisters I recognized from the inner sanctum was following Alicia. And a squad of Scutarii rangers standing still like statues behind the female Scutarius. It looked like a miniature Imperium here. Hey, if we have Space Marines here, we would make a complete set. I was still entertaining such silly notions when Thabris stepped forward, prompting me to follow him down the ramp. Alicia and the sisters saw me, and their faces lightened up. I had this weird sensation as if meeting the fans of my own club, except my fangirls were all wearing power armor and armed with bolters. Sir. SYRINE. As Amael greeted us both, I could see a subtle change in the sisters' expression. Wait, are they getting slightly pissy now because the interrogator was addressing me without honorifics? These formalities concerns might become an issue in the future. Maybe I should get one of those sister famulas to sort out such matters after the war is over. Thabris tilted his head slightly, silently inquiring about the crowd he was not expecting. They insisted on coming. Amael replied to the unspoken question. I nodded at Amael before greeting the others. Sisters, we meet again. Scutarii, greetings. The sisters bowed reverently while the leading Scutarius performed her sign of Cog as a formal return greeting. Greetings, Lady SYRINE. I am Kira Heptrix, Scutarii Alpha of the 2nd Cohort for Dominus Cycle's Expeditionary Force. We are here to escort you to the command bunker. Stepping into the command bunker, I could feel the eyes on me as my first time meeting with the governor and generals will be happening soon. So many people, so many important people were looking straight at me. These folk looked like characters straight from the concept artworks of the Grimdark universe. They all had an air of great importance about them that could only be cultivated with years of holding important positions. In front of me were rows of people wearing impeccable military uniforms with rows of glittering medals, and at the center of it all was a pretty blonde lady wearing a golden suit of power armor. As a mundane middle-level salary earner back on Earth, I never had the chance to meet any important individuals, let alone a group of high-level VIPs. But here I was, meeting the top-level people on the planet. Not of a country, but the entire planet. It would be straight-up lying if I were to claim I was not nervous. My stomach felt like churning, but surely it was imaginary as this body had yet to give me the slightest issue yet. Esteemed luminaries, your attention please. Wellmana spoke up, her voice amplified by the many-laud hailer built into her scholar attire. We, the Adeptus Sororitas, wish to announce and welcome the arrival of our very important guest of honor. That was my cue, and all eyes were on me. What was that old saying again? Ah. You can only make a first impression once, so better not screw this up. With this body, it should be no problem. Smiling at the crowd, my body moved naturally as it performed the Aquila curtsy. It came out smooth and easy. As the gesture was being done and my head was rising, I activated my halo on low intensity so as not to be too oppressive. A part of me knows this is somewhat cheating and underhanded. I am sorry, but too much is riding on this. I met with their gaze, seeing their pupils dilate and gradually increase my golden halo's intensity. Noticing the unusual sight before them, the bunker quieted down from its bustling noise. When the whole bunker fell completely silent, I spoke. Greetings to all. I am SYRINE, daughter of the Emperor and bearer of his authority, glad to be making your acquaintance. There was a slight pause before the sound of murmurs rose from the crowd. Amidst the little ruckus, the Sororitas' representatives rose as one. Led by the canoness herself, they walked right up to me. They stopped in front of me, performed their Aquila signs, and knelt. I, Dina Grace, canoness of Adeptus Sororitas representing the Order of the Shining Beacon, declare to all that we recognize your status as the holy daughter of the Emperor and the authority you wield in his name. Say what? Impossible. What absurdity is this? Amid escalated murmurs, a huge figure rose in the command bunker, walked towards me, and bowed deeply. I, Archdominus Cryptorecycle, the highest representative of Adeptus Mechanicus on this planet, hail the omniscient princess, direct creation of the manifestation of the Omniscia himself, and acknowledge the authority you wield in his name. Upon hearing this, the crowd erupted into an uproar and Thabris stepped in brandishing his rosette. Order. People. Order. We have a war to attend to for the Emperor's domain. This was the crucial part. While having the support of the Inquisition, Sororitas and Mechanicus were important for legitimacy, in reality, the mundane masses still outnumbered the combined institutions more than 1,000 to 1. Knowing humanity, there would doubtlessly be political troubles ahead, but those can wait for after the Civil War is over. I sighed internally, raised my hands and clapped once. As my hands connected, I cranked my halo to the maximum output for a split second and then turned it off, silencing everyone briefly for an opening to talk again. Thank you all for the welcome. While we have much to discuss, all will be for naught if we lose the upcoming battle, so let us win this first before anything else. I then started walking towards the planetary governor herself. As my intention became clear to the crowd, they made way and split like the Red Sea under Moses' command. Governor Catalina von Cleus, I greeted the lady in golden power armor with a slight bow. I am sorry for not announcing my arrival earlier. I will be in your care while staying on Nusquam. Arrangements were made beforehand to notify Catalina of my arrival, but she still seemed a bit caught off guard by my appearance. After looking stunned for a split second, Catalina's aristocratic instincts went back to work, and she returned my greeting with an elegant Aquila curtsy of her own. It was I who must apologize. It grieves us all to show a prestigious guest such as yourself the current state of our planet. I will help where possible, I said in a less than subtle attempt to shore up her legitimacy as a ruler for the planet. Governor, time is short, and the rebels will be making their move soon. Should we cut the pleasantries and start the last meeting before the decisive battle? Indeed. Will you do the honors of initiating the meeting? Catalina was fast on passing the ball back. This planet seemed to be filled with quite competent people, so I nodded and turned to Cryptorer. Archdominus, kindly start your presentation. Chapter 24 to War. It was strange to witness people clapping at the conclusion of a war plan's presentation. It had an eerie resemblance to the chilling scenes about a certain Operation Darkstorm from that depressing anime from many years ago. I was just hoping the actual execution of it would not be mirroring that disastrous result, but there was a key difference here. We were aiming for mass salvation, not destruction. You could say the push for my war plan was largely successful and had gotten everyone on board. Cryptor showed proof of our capabilities by disclosing the details on the strikes we made on the outposts earlier, but kept my true ability under wraps to the Nusquamese for the moment. The Nusquamese themselves were kinda stunned by the ambitious scale of our plan, and even did a standing ovation at the end of it. Well, given their prospects just went from the low chance of getting through this unscathed to potentially being big winners, it was an easy sell. Besides, it would be the Adeptus Mechanicus and Adeptus Sororitas that would be carrying out the key operations for the plan, so the Nusquamese just had to do the easier part of holding up their battle line to fully benefit. Catalina was beaming at the end of it, and I could see she was smiling from the bottom of her heart. My guess was she had been keeping up a facade of a strong leader for a while now, and things were finally looking up. Fabris also helped to push the acceptance of the plan by giving warnings on further potential threats and the prospect of little to no reinforcements on the way. Something did happen during the event as I noticed a male and ranter slipping out of the command bunker. It seemed like they were on a mission and some inquisitorial business was happening in the background. I did not have the full details but hoped Fabris underlings were as competent as they looked. Naturally, the Nusquamese tried to swarm me for more details after the presentation, but the Sororita's wall proved effective. I did have a brief moment with Governor Catalina to thank her for the support of the plan and took the chance to pass her the summary for incoming starship traffic from HIATUS. Catalina, I have some reports here that were meant for you. I then turned to signal Wellmana, who was a few steps behind me. The scholar hurried forward and respectfully passed a parchment scroll to the governor. The governor received the parchment, opened it up hesitantly, and her eyes widened. What is with this amount of incoming starship traffic? The scroll was the summary list compiled from the astropathic messages HIATUS had received recently. According to him, it dwarfed the combined traffic for the last combined 50 years. Seeing her flinching at the report was kind of hilarious and the desperate respite I needed. Before the Nusquamese top brass left for battle, Fabris dropped a gag order on them all, forbidding anyone to disclose my identity to people outside this meeting on pain of death and worse in our bid to exercise information control. The assembly was then dismissed as the time for the grand battle approached. I was later introduced to the other leading figures of the Sororitas. Of note were the other three Palatines, Sister Celisa Gallon, Sister Helenta Cadia, and Sister Domini Zeal. All were seniors to Alicia and looking the part of a capable field leader for the Chamber Militant Order. As the Palatines were present at the final war meeting, and thus witnessed my halo manifestation, they reverently received me. It prompted me to realize how convenient all these setups were for SYRINE. Someone had been pulling the strings for at least 1,000 years to make all this happen. I then followed the sisters to an assembly for the final inspection on key elements of the operation with Tech Priest de Taliad, Scutarii Al-Fakira, and a skull probe from Cryptorer following silently. Canoness D. Dinah was looking particularly delighted, like she could not wait to show me the result of her overnight labor. As I stepped out to another clearing, what awaited me left me speechless. On the field under a cloudy purple sky was a massed assembly of the elite units of Sororita's Seraphims in their familiar power armor with angelic-style jump packs. Their dull silver power armor glittering under the rays of the late morning sun that managed to sneak through the clouds periodically. The Seraphims were standing completely still, in stark contrast with the tail ends of purity seals on their armor that were waving gloriously in the wind. There was a low humming sound resonating in the air as the collective thrumming of active power armor sang in unison, anticipating the coming battle. My superhuman mind quickly counted their numbers and found there were 300 of them lining up in a military parade. The Order of the Shining Beacon had mobilized all their Seraphims for this critical operation. In the cloudy sky above, unfamiliar-looking flyers were doing low passes in tight formations. I soon recognized these as the Nuntius Hailer and a Magifier flyers, freshly awakened from storage by my request to join this fight. Giant holographic projections of the Order's symbol could be seen underneath some of them. This is gloriously magnificent. Magnificent work, sisters. I praised the Canoness and Palatines wholeheartedly, trying my best to play the part of being a leader who did none of the actual work but took notice of good efforts. The glorious sight of it almost brought tears to my eyes as my gamer self greedily soaked in the spectacle before me. In front of the 300 elite sisters stood a single seraphim more decorated looking than the rest. She was standing in attention with her helmet tucked underneath her right hand. This person's name had come up time and again during tactical planning sessions with Deep Dinah and Markila back at the fortress, so I knew who she was. Seraphim Excelsior Zarfia Abeo, the highest-ranking seraphim superior of the whole order. I almost lost myself completely to the visual spectacle before remembering my purpose here. I quickly summoned the skull probe over and connected myself to the network while walking towards Zarfia. Zarfia was dark-skinned, short-haired, and had thick lips. Maybe a descendant of African lineage? She had the complete look of a no-nonsense, tough-as-nails lady you would expect to see as a squad sergeant in a classic sci-fi movie. Sister Zarfia, I called out to her and formed my Achilles sign. We just met. but already a great burden was placed on you by me. On that note, I beg for your pardon. Zarfia will be playing a key role in leading the Seraphims for the first phase of our operation. If successful, we could potentially silence all the big guns in the rebels' rear formation with minimum casualties, so a lot was hanging on her capabilities. Holy daughter, she maglocked her helmet, returned the Achilles sign, and replied, I was briefed on the operation and God Emperor willing, will not fail the mission. Zarfia paused for a short while before asking, May I have your permission to ask some questions regarding this operation? I nodded for her to go ahead. The issue of the air transports has yet to be resolved, and how are we supposed to penetrate the rebels' air fighters' defense net with so few fighters on our side? As with standard practice on military matters, certain details were being withheld to prevent information leaks, and this lady was not afraid to ask key questions. I am liking her guts already. Complex imperial politics had shaped certain aspects of the Civil War. A point not mentioned earlier was that since almost all Imperial aircraft were under the direct jurisdiction of the Aeronautica Imperialis branch of the Imperial Navy, the Master Chief Petty Navy officer on the planet had greatly disapproved on the prospect of losing precious aircraft over this silly civil dispute. Said Navy officer had since put his feet down, forbidding both sides from utilizing any aircraft under his jurisdiction for the duration of this war. As a result, only a limited number of aircraft that was wholly owned by the Nusquamese locally had joined the fight, and heavy bombers were not involved in the battle. These unique circumstances had allowed both sides to mass tank columns without getting worried about being bombarded to Kingdom Come from the air. Still, the rebels currently controlled more aircraft than the Loyalists on paper. From Zarfia's point of view, this would be a great cause for concern, for she will be leading all of her order's precious Seraphims for a deep strike mission without much air cover. Your transports are here, I said just in time as a fleet of Mechanicus air transporters appeared in the sky. I had been tracking them since they entered the radar net. Crypterer had kept them hidden, deploying these from his starship to stay away from any possible prying eyes until the last possible moment, only ordering them in when it was time to move out. As for the enemy fighters, have no worries, for we have methods to deal with them. I need to beg for your pardon again, as no further details will be given. All I can do is to ask you to have a little faith in our planning for that. If that is what is asked of us, very well. Zarfia bowed. She then asked another question, this time hesitantly, Holy daughter, we heard from the Canoness that you could manifest his light. Please, can we witness it for ourselves? His light? Did she mean my halo? I had been spamming my halo recently to get over tight corners and grew a bit weary about it. Frankly, it felt manipulative to the point that I was starting to feel uncomfortable about its usage on the people around me. Hold on, she said, we. By we, do you mean everyone here? I asked. Zarfia nodded. Inwardly, I cringed hard at the request. The Adeptus Sororitas could rightly be considered as one of the biggest state-sanctioned dedicated fan clubs for the God Emperor of mankind, where membership is for life and the membership fee is eternal service to the Church. It would be natural for them to seek out any tangible proof of his divinity whenever possible. Dinah would not skip such a golden opportunity to boost the morale of her order, as they had taken a few horrible setbacks lately. I took a closer look at Zarfia and realized she could not have been older than 30 years old, which prompted me to look at the rows and rows of Seraphims behind her. Some had the visor of their helmet lifted, so I could see a part of their faces. By the gods, most of them looked so young. Girls about half my mental age were geared up and prepared to go to war zones for their beliefs. Surely I could put aside my own feelings for a while and give them a light show? Feeling obligated, I nodded to Zarfia. I understand. Sister Markila, the relic sword, please. Celestine's superior Markila had been hanging around carrying the sheathed nameless sword beside Dinah in what might be a vain attempt of enticing me to claim active leadership of the order. Sorry, but that is not going to happen anytime soon. I will consider that only after the war is over. For now, I just need the sword for the complete light show package and take this opportunity to live test the Nuncius Flyer's systems. Markila quickly walked over and presented me with the hilt of the nameless sword reverently, mimicking a scene I had witnessed before in that meeting room back in the fortress. Recalling how Dinah did it, I mirrored her stance, silently prayed to not screw this up, and successfully pulled the sword out in one go. The nameless sword exited its sheath with a blinding light and became the focal point on the field. I ordered the skull probe over and mentally triggered the advanced selfie-picked feed function while accessing the wireless network with my authority to project the image and sound feed onto all the Nuncius Flyers. Immediately, all the holographic projections on the flyers switched to gigantic portraits of myself via the direct live feed from the probe. This was starting to feel like a concert now. "Hello," I said to the skull probe, and through its microphone my voice echoed throughout the whole field via the LOD hailers on the flyers. Well, this is the next level of cringe. It was so embarrassingly awkward my skin started to crawl, but there was no going back now. It was at this time at the back of my mind, where some cold calculations were always running, I realized the air transports will land in about a minute. It was kind of a social emergency, so I activated my thought acceleration to get some breathing space. I had no time and urgently needed a short pre-battle speech that is badass enough for this universe. Quickly, I scanned my mind for all lore and contents regarding this matter, and only one result surfaced. Relieved, I gave a silent thank you to my old self for binging YouTube contents before changing the original text for my usage. They had all been briefed, so I will just go straight to the point. Looking at the silent crowd, I took a deep breath, raised my sword, and activated my halo. The moment the assembled sisters saw it, their expressions softened and their eyes lightened up. Encouraged by their unspoken support, despite feeling ridiculous in front of so many people, I said the prepared words out loud. It was broadcasted clearly over by the laud hailers. "Seraphims, sisters, absolution is at hand. We are facing our sacred duty. Let justice be your song. Let righteousness guide your weapons. We are the daughters of the Emperor. We are the bearers of his will, and our mission shall be done. For our undying Lord and Savior. For the Emperor." I finished the really short speech by firing up my halo up to the highest level while activating the psychic flames on the nameless sword. A huge plume, much larger and brighter than the one before, burst forth from the blade, and the seraphims who were previously silent broke out in thunderous applause. With my gigantic holograms in the air, a religious resonance of sorts happened, and the piousness was palpable in the air. The seraphims beamed. Echoes of their joyous cries hit me like solid waves as they witnessed with their own eyes the proof of their God's divinity through my actions. "For the Emperor! Emperor! Emperor!" The sisters' chants shook the field. Then the weirdest things happened. As if the heavens were answering, a strong ray of sun broke through the clouds to shine directly onto the field, illuminating the ecstatic sisters. "He answered," someone cried out, which only pushed their heightened zeal further. One could almost taste their emotion. I was totally stunned witnessing this ridiculous scene. What are the odds of the sun ray breaking through the clouds at this exact moment? As if answering my question, another thought immediately surfaced. Who are you yourself? Look around. Aren't your very existence proof of his divinity? I looked back and found the canoness and palatines all kneeling behind me. Some of them were weeping openly. The sisters continued their chants until the Mechanicus air transports arrived shortly. They landed in perfect synchronicity for the seraphims to board. Somewhat in a daze myself, I bid farewell to the sisters as they got on their way to war and took the extra care in giving directives to their canoness while returning the nameless sword to her. "Deodina, please take care of your sisters and yourself. I look forward to your triumphant return," I said, indirectly prohibiting the idea of them resorting to martyrdom to achieve their mission. Unlike me, she will be heading to the field while I would be doing my part in the back line. Giving her the sword to keep was also meant to encourage her to come back in one piece, lest the priceless relic is lost in the chaos of battle. I have my selfish reason for wanting to minimize the potential casualties of the sisters. If a lot of the senior members of the sororitas got themselves killed in this battle, it might cripple the little Minori's order. Should that happen, the surviving sisters will inevitably look to me for future directions, and that would be a world of hurt which I want to avoid. Soon all the battle sisters had left for the battle, leaving behind the non-militant members and the Dominus liaison. Kira approached me with a bow. "My lady, Dominus Cycle is waiting." Cryptorer and I met up to go through with the final details of our plan. We were walking towards a huge setup the Mechanicus had prepared for this battle. My best description of it would be a podium of wires. A monstrous-looking contraption that was finished for the operation and placed in a discreet location behind layers of protection that seemed to be able to withstand even the ungodly firepower from a Titan. Wellmana, Verida, and Kira were behind us, silently following. As we walked towards the monstrosity, my feeling of unease grew. For a fleeting moment, I was not sure why I was there in the first place and tittered on the edge of having a panic attack. It was then the Archdominus spoke. "I commend you. Your ability to grab a crowd's attention is remarkable," candid Cryptorer. Is he trying to comfort me? Looking at the towering post-human, an idea suddenly came to my mind. "Want me to teach you a trick?" I asked. "Trick?" "Undefined, however. Please proceed. If you need everyone to listen to you in a hurry, do this. First, You slap your hands together loudly, then say this. Slapping my hands together, producing a loud clap. I then proceeded to rub them together in a classic scheming pose mimicking a certain famous mad scientist from another far future before saying it out loud. Good news, everyone. Following my example, Cryptorer slapped his primary hands together, but the sound that came out was a low metallic clink instead of a loud hand clap. He paused for a split second before concluding, Phase 1 failure. Sound vibration quality unsatisfactory. Improvised, synthesis sound vibration for Phase 1. I offered. Recalibrating. Cryptor replied before slapping his primary hands together again. This time as his hands touched each other, he played back the clapping sound I produced earlier with enhanced volume, resulting in a satisfying clap. Then proceeded to rub his hands together with the same scheming pose before saying out loud, Good news, everyone. Watching the whole thing happen, I was thankful for all the Regulus, action override, messages that kept popping into my view. I was beginning to really appreciate it. Well done. I gave him a thumbs up. I will field test this trick when appropriate and report back the result. Cryptor replied as we reached the gigantic podium. My little tricks are nothing compared to your real groundwork. I praised him wholeheartedly and asked, How did you manage to get the timing of their grand assault so well? That part is simple. Through the information network of this planet, I had contacted all the tech priests and engineers who happened to be serving under the rebels' side. To each and every one of them, a coded message that only a true disciple of the Omnicia could decipher was delivered. I gave them two choices, serve the Omnicia as planned or get out of our way. Fail to comply, and I will personally see to it they will be hunted down and their data cores be melted for recycling. What are you? Some space godfather? I took another look at him, imagining the Dominus canting to himself about giving offers the followers of his cult can't refuse, like a true techno-mob boss. I am so glad we have you on our side. I remarked truthfully, having Dominus Cryptorer as your enemy on the other side of the battlefield was no laughing matter. As per your previous directive, I must inform you the action you are about to partake in will result in the loss of human lives, casualty estimates unknown, highly dependent on your performance and a variety of factors too complex to calculate. Due to your request and the 20-fold increase in data load required for the operation, there is a chance that the working strain might exceed your capacity to handle, and we have no previous experience for such heavy use of your ability. In the light of that, I have requested Inquisitor Thorn to provide dedicated medical personnel, just in case. Somehow he was sounding like a nagging old dad again, but I was grateful. Who knew the person who was showing me the most care after coming to this world was from the Mechanicus, even if it was for his own ulterior motives. It was then I noticed the complicated expressions on both the sisters who were following us. Cryptorer only spoke vocally when it was a necessity, so from their point of view, the Archdominus was simply dropping incomprehensible binary the whole time while I talked. It was such a classic sci-fi trope on the protagonist talking to a beeping robot sidekick. The whole scene must have been looking very confusing for the sisters, so I smiled apologetically to them. Thank you, Crypto. Let us pray that. I looked up at the cloudy purple sky, thinking about all the people who were about to die today, and said the only thing that came to my mind. The Emperor Protects. Chapter 25, First Strike. Today was the day that would determine who became the governor of this planet. Flight Captain Galeus, the commanding officer for Flight Squadron 315, was feeling good on the big day of the grand assault as his personalized fighter aircraft cut through the purple sky towards the front line with his trusted squad mates in tight formation. They had the governor's forces where they wanted them, and a decisive battle was commencing. Going from past experience of dozens of engagements, there was no way they were going to lose this fight. Galeus was not a man who was particularly interested in the politics of it all. The governor and her half-brother had a quarrel, so war broke out. As far as he was concerned, he was just glad that he was on the winning team. After this was done and settled, Lord Kai then would replace his half-sister as the new planetary governor. Things will carry on as normal after the mess was cleaned up. The God Emperor will remain as unmoving as the Externus sun, and by his good grace maybe he will earn a few medals and get a good raise. Things were looking up. That said, the forward squadrons ahead of him had not sent their updates yet, and the chatter from headquarters went still some time ago. Galeus was about to double-check if he had muted his Vox unit by accident when a message started playing. From it came a calm and soothing female voice that he had never heard before. Attention to forces under Kythan von Cleus. This is a statement made on behalf of Catalina von Cleus, the rightful governor of Nusquam, backed by a joint declaration from the Inquisition, Adeptus Sororitas and Adeptus Mechanicus. Your actions of taking up arms against Governor Catalina is deemed illegal and misguided. By the Emperor's grace, we will confer to you a chance to surrender. Choose wisely when the opportunity to return to the right path presents itself. The Emperor protects. Gallius was livid. Just what in the throne's name is headquarters doing? Losing out on electronics warfare now of all times? Gallius tried a few settings on his Vox unit, but all the frequencies were occupied with the same repeating message. Just when he was about to turn to another frequency, the message changed. Attention to Flight Squadrons 315 to 320, your chance is here. We have total control over your radar net, Vox network, and ground anti-air systems. Eject from your aircraft now for salvation. Gallius gulped and felt a cold premonition as the Vox singled out his flight group, making it sound less like an empty threat by the second. He quickly checked on his auspex and was stunned to find its readings had gone haywire and he could not even contact his squadmates. At the same time, his onboard warning system started to chime, signaling his craft was being targeted by anti-air systems despite the fact they were still flying in airspace under their control. This is not a drill. Please don't die from this. You have 10 seconds to comply starting now. 10, 9. Gallius watched in disbelief as his day abruptly turned 180. He looked outside from his cockpit and witnessed the rest of his squadron seemed to be in the same predicament. His first wingman was even frantically hand-signaling to him. 6, 5, 4. The gentle female voice continued her relentless countdown. The incongruity between how it sounded and its lethal implication paralyzed Gallius. Then he saw it, on the edge of his vision. Far off in front were the forward squadrons, and they were falling from the sky in droves. Trails of smoke signaling the deaths of aircraft and explosions filled the sky while the warning chime inside his cockpit was getting deafening. 2, 1. Gallius screamed and hit the eject button. A split second later, he was in the air with his seat. He looked down just in time to witness his prized personalized fighter aircraft being blown to bits by anti-air fire originating from behind the lines. Meanwhile, higher in the sky elsewhere, Zarfia Abeo was praying to the Emperor while waiting for the green light to deep strike into battle. She and her 300 Seraphim sisters had gone on a very risky mission riding on blind faith, boarding unfamiliar air transports flying over enemy airspace with no fighter escorts. As prepared as she ever would be for the impending operation, Zarfia went into a warrior's meditative trance, making peace with herself while awaiting whatever fate awaited her. Just hours earlier, Canoness D. Dinah had returned from her abrupt departure with a renewed sense of zeal none of them had ever remembered witnessing. A quick meeting involving all the highest-ranking members of the Order was then held. Zarfia and the others had come out of the meeting infected by that zeal as well, but it still sounded too good to be true. She had still harbored a sliver of lingering doubts until witnessing that light herself. Just the fact that their holy daughter was with them had burned away any question if their actions were ordained by his will. Strangely, despite currently being in the most dangerous part of the mission, Zarfia felt totally at peace. Having strong faith is one thing. Witnessing the divinity of one's God manifested, bringing absolution to that faith was a totally different level of experience. His divinity is real. She could die now and be happy, knowing even if this mission failed with her death, somehow it will still be part of his divine plan. Ding! A system chime broke her reverie. She recognized the sound and put on her helmet for the tactical relay update. What she saw shocked her. A complete tactical map of their target base with astonishing detail was displayed in her helmet's data feed together with an ETA countdown of 2 minutes. I watched as a literal god of war as the rebel flight squadrons 315 to 320 blipped out of existence, further cementing total air superiority for our side as the grand trap was about to be sprung. I was not sure if the pilots ejected from their aircraft in time, but a final warning was delivered before the anti-air weapons hit their aircraft. Everything was calculated down to the second, giving them no chance to react outside the script. The next targeted message was prepared as I kept up with thought acceleration to control multiple complex processes, compiled my warnings in digital sound data, and delivered it to the next batch of Rebel strike wings while targeting them with anti-air assets from the Rebels' own backyard. At the same time, I was fabricating false data and Auspex readouts for their headquarters to keep their main battle force on the ground rolling deeper into our trap. There would be a lot of confused people on the Rebels' side as their anti-air placements were seemingly firing at random. But since most real long-range targeting was done by cogitators, it was a simple hijacking operation for me once a connection was established from the back end. My eyes were closed, but a virtual map of the battlefield created from live data had replaced my vision. Hundreds of thousands of unit indicators populated the map, each signaling their real on-field counterparts. Thousands upon thousands of messages of cogitators establishing connections and complying flashed by in my view, and I soon learned to tune it out. With the secret aid of Mechanicus personnel from the inside, we now had total control over the long-range Vox network of the rebels, and millions of Vox messages were intercepted, decrypted and analyzed by cryptophers, advanced cogitators in orbit for tactical information, while I acted as a conduit between the whole process. Exabytes worth of data must have gone through me every second to direct the battlefield, and for the first time, I felt a bit strained. Everything is going as planned. Such a numerical improbability. Cryptor's comment popped into my head. He was on his own command throne close by elsewhere to oversee the deployment of Mechanicus forces. The Dominus words prompted me to double-check on the status of Zarfia and her sisters. It seemed like they had successfully reached their destination and were in the process of deploying from the sky. I heaved a sigh of relief, but immediately got back to my feet, checking on everything, since the biggest hidden threat of all, the renegade space marines, had yet to show themselves. The looming threat of an ultra-elite force of unknown numbers and modus operandi was the biggest unaccounted risk factor of the whole operation. Despite all the war meetings we had been through, no ideal solution ever surfaced on how to deal with them, so we had left it at that, reserving some forces on our part and hoping for the best. So are we good in proceeding with our plan? I asked via the information link established via the podium. Yes. Are you holding up fine on your end? It felt a bit strained, but it is manageable for now. Good. The back-end elements are in place. We shall proceed as planned. Omnicia be praised. Your actions of taking up arms against Governor Catalina is deemed illegal and misguided. By the Emperor's grace, we will confer to you a chance to surrender. Rearguard General Boren raised his eyebrows at the message coming from the central Vox unit of his command bunker. Charged with all the artillery battalions under Lord Kaidan, Boren had multiple units of dedicated artillery groups under his direct command tucked safely behind the main offensive line, guarded by layers of protection. He was ready for a day of action on delivering death to the front line via extreme range, and had been waiting for targeting orders from the main battle group, but it was strangely quiet from the front. Then the Vox network seemed to be hijacked by the governor's forces and had been repeating the same weird message ever since. Bah, humbug. Boren scoffed, as if talking rubbish alone will change the course of the war. We have thousands of guns here waiting to sing to your demise, soon-to-be ex-governor. Maybe she knew her only way to get out of this is to talk us into surrendering, one of his aides offered. Boren laughed slightly at his aide's awkward effort to shine his shoes, but had to admit he was never much of a fan of Catalina due to personal taste. The general mused at his own thoughts, but was soon getting back into working mode and demanded, "Quit idling around. Who can tell me when will the Vox network be fixed?" Suddenly there was a commotion and a lot of sounds were heard from the outside. Boren was alarmed as he searched his memories, and it reminded him of the retro boosters of jump packs. But none of the units under the banner of Kaidan utilized such advanced equipment. Before he could verify what was happening, the sound of bolt weapons firing was heard all around. "We are under attack." Someone in the command bunker snapped to his senses and called out, The Vox is not working." Another shouted, "Impossible." Boren thought to himself, the governor's forces had deep-struck jump pack units directly onto his position and cut off his communications. But the Auspex radar net had picked up nothing, unless all our Auspex and Vox network had been compromised. He shouted his belated realization. Not only that, the fact that elite enemy units had directly landed on his command bunker meant a catastrophic level of classified information might have been leaked out. The short-range independent Vox units should still work. Get the emergency runner truck going and warn Lord Kaidan that we are compromised. Someone did that, and a Torox truck parked at the edge of his base immediately sped off towards their headquarters. Boren had been a general for decades. He prepared such a contingency for any just-in-case scenarios. Little did he know squads of Mechanicus Sicarian infiltrators had infiltrated near their base. The truck was ambushed and never reached the headquarters, while their short-range Vox was hopelessly out of range to warn their colleagues. Back in the base, Boren watched in disbelief as the reinforced plasteel door of his command bunker began to glow red-hot and was cut down by the distinct superheated melta beams. The administrative staff inside Boren's command bunker were still frantically voxing for help when the armored angelic forms of multiple Sororitas seraphims stepped through the fallen plasteel door and came straight for them with bolt pistols and inferno pistols raised. One of Boren's bodyguards fired a few lost pistol shots at the Seraphims, but the lost bolts bounced off harmlessly from their power armor, and his brain was blown off for his troubles. Boren had drawn his lost pistol, but he knew it was a lost cause. Against elite sisters wearing power armor in close quarters, their odds of winning were close to zero, so he waited for death. To his surprise, the sisters pointed their weapons at him but took no further action. For a while, the only sound that could be heard inside the bunker was the Vox unit repeating the same messages. Staring down death, General Boren watched in astonishment as the Seraphims in front of him parted, giving way as a Seraphim superior stepped forward. Boren could easily tell she was a sister superior, as the leading Seraphim was brandishing a power sword and wore a more decorated helmet than the rest. The sister superior looked at him and removed her helmet, revealing a stern-looking dark-skinned woman. She eyed Boren for a while before speaking. "Greetings, General. I am Zarfia Abayo, Seraphim Excelsior of the Order of the Shining Beacon." She then turned her head at the Vox unit, which was still continuing its message. "Choose wisely when the opportunity to return to the right path presents itself. The Emperor protects." Zarfia seemed to smile upon hearing that, and eyed General Boren again before saying, "Our holy daughter has spoken. This act of mercy will only be granted to you once, so what is your choice?" "Choose wisely, General." Boren gritted his teeth, made his resolution to die standing, and replied, "You won this fight. Do what you want, but I will not betray my people." Again he expected death, but Zarfia simply looked at him with an expression that suggested pity, like a parent looking down at a wayward child throwing a tantrum. "General, I believe you do not understand the gravity of the situation. Fortunately, there is a certain someone who could enlighten you. Sisters, secure the others in a separate room." It was at this time a skull probe with a sophisticated-looking device attached underneath it floated into the command bunker. It flew around doing some sort of scanning for a while, then it stopped flying and settled down on a desk in front of the general. As it did so, all the Vox devices inside the bunker finally stopped broadcasting. In the eerie silence, the device under the skull probe came to life, and out pops a hologram featuring a young lady with an air of saintly regality. As one, all the Seraphims present bowed deeply towards the figure. "Excellent work, sisters," said the figure in the hologram, her voice a match with the one that was on ceaseless repetition earlier. "Now, I would like to have a few words with the general." Moments later, a hapless Boren was forced into a conversation with the hologram, a diligent Zarfia looking from the side. "General Boren Yalston, I am sorry we have to meet as opposition on this battlefield. My name is SYRINE, daughter of the Emperor. I am supporting Governor Catalina von Cleus in this unfortunate conflict." Receiving no response, SYRINE paused for a moment before asking a shocking question. "Have you forsaken the Imperium, General?" Boren felt his breath was taken. Chapter 26 Assassination. Target acquired. After verifying their target was indeed Kythan von Cleus, Neandra activated the recording function on her binoculars and gave the signal to attack. A long distance away, elite kill team members of Mechanicus Scutarii Rangers fired their transuranic arquebus from concealed positions. Neandra watched as the supersonic depleted transuranium shells that could fully penetrate a battle tank went through layers of reinforced concrete and hit their mark, only to be repelled by an energy field that materialized on impact. Even through the walls, the advanced sensors in her multispectrum binoculars had confirmed their quarry was still alive. This rare joint operation between the Inquisition and Mechanicus had started off promising enough, but a quick and easy resolution still eluded them. If it had gone as planned, Neandra just had to be a witness to Kythan's demise, but unfortunately, the man was resourceful enough to survive their sniper volley. So it is back to the standard affair after all, the assassin thought as she sprang into action and ran forward after sending out another signal notifying the strike force to go for the assault. Way ahead of her, squads of Mechanicus Sicarian infiltrators who had snuck forward earlier broke their concealment and started a direct attack. Artillery fire inbound onto target base, variant Manicore Storm Eagle rockets, ETA 5 minutes. The Scutarii Alpha Ranger who was in charge of the strike force dropped his Vox warning with a tone so flat most people would think the speaker was completely devoid of biological parts, but what Neandra took notice of was their choice of weapon deployed. Manticore rockets again? She mused to herself, silently noting how even the cult Mechanicus, an order that was supposed to champion cold logic, could still be petty when a chance of payback presented itself. Inside the perimeter of the headquarters, hell broke loose as automated sentry guns came online, but instead of shooting the invaders, turned their guns on the occupants of the base instead. Heavy bolter rounds started firing indiscriminately into troops and administrative staff with gruesome effects. Amid the ensuing havoc, any troops that managed to rally soon clashed with the Sicarian infiltrators, and the results were spectacularly one-sided. The tall and slender forms of post-human infiltrators barely broke their stride as they cut through the human ranks with flechette blasters spitting death, while taser goads split heads and bones in showers of blood and gore. The cybernetic killers sped relentlessly forward, all the while broadcasting mind-bending neurostatic bombardment of anguish-static screams on disruptive wavelengths from their dome-shaped heads to cause further disarray as they decimated the rebel ranks. The rebels who were caught between a surprise attack and subverted security measures stood no chance. Dozens of people died in the first 20 seconds before a general alarm was even sounded. Neandra was getting close to the quarry, her ponytail and chameleon camo cloak fluttering in the air as she dashed forward with inhuman speed and leaping over heaps of dead bodies. Right in front of her, a short distance ahead, the squad of infiltrators charged with securing Kai then went inside the main building for the finishing blow. Archdominus Cryptorecycle had deemed the assassination attempt on SYRINE an act of high terrorism and pinning the responsibilities on Kai then. This operation served both as payback and a decapitating strike on the leadership of the rebel army. An elite strike force was assigned to the task, and Neandra was attached to it as both liaison and overseer of the operation for the Inquisition, as it was in Inquisitor Thabris' interest to confirm Kythan's elimination. This was the first time Neandra was working with members of Skitarii, the cybernetic military forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Looking at the speedy progress, even as a lethal killer herself, she was impressed by their cold efficiency. Just as she was anticipating the mission coming to a closure, the sounds of close-quarter melee erupted from the target building. Kythan still has forces that are able to withstand the Skitarii? The moment that idea crossed Neandra's mind, there was a sudden sense of foreboding warning her that she had turned from a hunter to the hunted. Trusting her instincts, Neandra quickly moved to one side without hesitation and barely dodged an unseen attack that seemingly materialized from the thin air, feeling the air sizzling uncomfortably close to her face. Despite the lack of a visible enemy, the assassin somehow managed to parry 2 more heavy blows in a heartbeat before jumping back and dispersing a cloud of powder in front of her. Being the chief distributor for Thabris' inquisitorial judgment for decades had taught Neandra to prepare for all eventualities, so a seemingly invisible enemy hardly counted as the strangest thing she had seen in her unconventional career. When her powder made contact with the enemy, a curious reaction occurred and undid whatever was holding up the stealth, revealing her opponent to be a space marine in full warplate. Pushing down her own shock at the revelation, she had but half a second to get a proper look at the marine without any time to dwell on how a 7-feet-tall space marine could turn invisible. He appeared to be wearing a dark gray suit of power armor of mismatched components devoid of any markings, but was primarily made up from Mark VI armor. His choice of melee weapon was a single lightning claw gauntlet. The Marine's Corvus pattern helmet with cold blue lens stared like an avian beast as he pointed a bolt pistol at her, just in time for the assassin with transhuman reflexes to dodge his shot by the smallest distance. Neandra lunged forward with her power sword, forcing the Marine to take a step back. Taking her chance, the assassin quickly drew and fired her grav pistol at the Marine near point-blank range with her free hand. A weapon that was really effective against large-mass targets. Grav weapons were rare but not out of reach from the Inquisition. Knowing the possibility of encountering renegade Marines again, she had prepared the pistol just in case any of them showed up. Too close to dodge the attack, the Marine instead blocked the shot with his bolt pistol, sacrificing his sidearm and retaliating with a brutal and swift upwards kick. His attack connected, but to his surprise, the assassin took the blow, the close space severely limiting its force to be lethal. She caught the kick with her arms and used it to launch herself backwards to put some distance between them. The Marine watched as the Neandra nimbly flew back, drawing her camo cloak in and activating it to melt her image with the surroundings an instant later. He was about to give chase before realizing the perimeter heavy bolter sentries had started training their guns on him, so he retreated. Moments later, Neandra was applying first aid to her bruised forearm that had absorbed the kick while watching from a safe distance as the rebel headquarters compound was leveled by relentless bombardment. With its void shield generator shut down, the base was helpless against conventional attacks. Earlier, she had witnessed a dark gray Astartes Thunderhawk gunship flying extremely low to the ground, fleeing from the site like a wounded beast. She had little doubt Kythan had escaped on it. The Skitarii Alpha Ranger, sounding as lifeless as before, had reported back to her about the Sicarian infiltrators squad tasked with apprehending the rebel lord had clashed with an unknown Astartes unit and was presumed lost before the bombardment hit. She raised her bandaged forearm. It stung a little even with all the pain suppressants in her system. The blunt force trauma from a Space Marine's kick with his power-armored boot could have caused some deep muscle and bone damage. She made a mental note to get prepared for some of Verida's good old berating while sending out a coded message to Thabris informing him of the unfortunate mission result and her strange encounter with a Space Marine who can turn invisible. Mission update: Operation Decapitation had concluded. Moments ago, I had flipped the identification friend or foe protocol on the sentry gun network and turned off the rebel headquarters void shield generators. It would appear the carnage was over. Fighting through my complicated feelings of getting people slaughtered, I asked the important question. Did we get Kythen? Negative. Kythen von Cleus had escaped due to renegade Astartes' intervention. Cryptopher sent via mind link. So they finally showed up in the theater of war. How many Marines? Reports suggest only a very small number of them took part in the action. A single Astartes Thunderhawk gunship left the area with Kythen on board. There is this more concerning report about at least one of the Marines our strike force encountered seemed to possess an unconventional ability, being completely imperceivable even by a transhuman until he attacks. You mean they could be totally undetectable? Is this some sort of chaos sorcery? I was shocked. That might explain why I could not detect any of them in the war zone. How that was achieved is yet unknown, but so far there has been only one reported case. Seeing they had never used it to get rid of the governor, this ability is either a very rare skill or could be constrained by severe deployment limitations. Are we at risk of such attacks? Although the odds of them infiltrating here for a surgical strike of their own is very low. Just in case, I have ordered Skitarii Alpha Kira to double the guards stationed around you and me. So, after all that effort, we could have ended the war then and there. Unfortunate, but the decapitation of his military leadership capacity was successful. He has suffered a catastrophic loss of key personnel and his army headquarters was completely destroyed. I am relaying to you all the acquired data as we speak. Thank you, Crypto. I sent back while receiving the huge data cache, at the same time ignoring the waterfall-like constant messages of Cogitatas establishing connections and complying. I took a peek and noticed Neandra had taken part in that mission and was relieved to see no report of her injury or demise. I quickly took out the key information and compiled the data into a presentable format to be used later and sent an advance copy to the rear end of the rebel forces where the Sororitas Seraphims were holding up rearguard General Boren. A lot of effort had been put into the operation to take over the rebels' backline. I had even enticed the general to talk so a more comprehensive analysis of his speech pattern could be done. It was then demonstrated to let him know we do not exactly need his cooperation to screw up their whole army. In truth, I did prefer him to surrender to us peacefully. Boren Yalston, known as Ironback Boren by his subordinates, has a reputation for being a straight-talking, stern but fair man with effective leadership skills. Just the type of man the planet needed for defense. Boren had since been asked about the renegade Marines, but he apparently knew nothing about it. His shocked reaction upon being informed and shown evidence of the existence of Space Marines seemed genuine enough, so that meant only the people at the very top of the rebel faction were involved with the Marines. The plot thickens. Successfully getting Boren and the forces under his command out of the fight meant we had for the moment put multiple artillery regiments out of the equation, effectively silencing thousands of big guns in the back line. Now we just need to wrap up the big fight quickly to prevent further complications. We had since rerouted the whole tactical data streaming from the rebel headquarters and sent a constant stream of fake information to the rebels' on-field army, masking loyalist movements to insert our entire army into strategic positions right under their noses. From the rebel army's point of view, their Auspex readout told them they were routing us and sending the governor's forces on a disarrayed retreat. We had deployed a complex mix of false readings and sacrificial dummy units to make the ploy look as convincing as possible. Hopefully the fog of war, combined with the endless supply of smoke in the actual battlefield, could last long enough for the deception to work. I watched in my vision as the thousands of pieces moved slowly into position, pushing the Grand Rebel army further and further into a tactically unsalvageable position. Suddenly, there was a rapid stream of notifications indicating a surge of intercepted Vox messages coming from the rebel army. Mixed within reports of coordination and engagements were the personal messages from the rebel army. Not sure why, but a flurry of personalized Vox messages started appearing on the field. What is this? They had broken their Vox discipline? Apparently, it is a peculiar local custom known as Last Vox Right with some historical background. I had advised Governor Catalina against granting the privilege to her troops since it will give away our position. Cryptopher replied with a hint of disapproval. Curious, I dipped my consciousness into the stream to sample the contents, and a massive amount of information came passing through me. Here was a father telling his children to behave if he did not return. There a son was calling his parents not to worry about him because they were winning. Another confessed her love to a colleague and asked for a chance for dinner should he return. Like a slow summer phantom rain, the trickle of private Vox messages went through me. It drizzled slowly at first, then steadily it gained momentum. More and more messages came forth until it poured like a tropical storm. Again and again, similar messages and patterns kept repeating themselves. Parents and children worried about one another, friends wishing luck amongst peers, lovers calling out to each other. Hundreds of thousands of people were voxing out what could have been their messages if they never met one another again. The aftertaste of the data stream started flooding and formed an image of the combined soul of the army staring back at me. Their messages were so mundane, so ordinary. They are just ordinary people. I watched as a silent observer in a sea of well wishes and farewells. After a while it was getting hard to observe, so my consciousness was retracted from that data stream. When my vision returned to the godlike view of the battlefield, a few good old, Regulus notices had popped up on the edge of it. Breathing in deeply, my mind struggled to focus. Throne, damn it, I can do this. Then suddenly, an odd but familiar sensation hit me, one that should not have happened. Doubting myself, I swatted my forehead with the back of my palm to make sure, but there it was. On the back of my palm was a patch of moisture. It was sweat. I was sweating for the first time since coming to this world. Just as its implication was being pondered, a wave of dizziness and headaches hit me. I reflexively held onto the side of the podium, but then my body started to shake slightly before stabilizing back. Oh hi. Mortality, my old friend. Long time no see. Lady SYRINE? Behind me came the concerned voice of my assigned caretakers, Verita and Wellmana. I am all right, just feeling a bit tired, I assured them, but inwardly a sense of panic was setting in. So this hyper-advanced transhuman body has its limits after all. Chapter 27, Grand Army. There was an unsettling atmosphere in the air as the battle to decide the fate of the planet progressed into unknown territory. On a front line stretching 300 kilometers long, the Grand Army under the banner of Kythan von Cleus, the half-brother of the current planetary governor, was rolling down from the north after weeks of preparation, hoping for a decisive engagement. With Kythan's forces moving towards the capital city of Nusquam, to retreat would mean ceding several key planetary infrastructures to the rebel forces, losing both prestige and any advantage held. Strategically, Catalina could not avoid this battle. Kythan's mother was from the northern part of the planet, belonging to the more hardy bunch of the populace whose military tradition went further back than their southern counterparts. This was reflected in the military divisions on the planet itself. The North had long since prided itself on the fact that most elite and celebrated battalions were from their side. Due to that, while the armies facing off against each other was comparable in strength on paper, Kythan's faction was confident in the final outcome of this matchup. The Grand Northern Army was made up of roughly 4,000 battle tanks and 10,000 combat vehicles separated into 3 battle groups. The bulk of the army was in the center group with 2 other smaller groups on each side to prevent flanking maneuvers. Choose wisely when the opportunity to return to the right path presents itself. The Emperor protects. The speaker blared with a gentle female voice, repeating the same message again and again inside the confined compartment of a Torox armored transport. What the frack is that? Trooper Mattias asked. Like hell I know. Maybe it is your mother talking on the speaker? Comm Specialist Lantis replied. I will be damned. You can actually compliment. If his mother sounded that beautiful, I would not mind meeting her one bit, teased Trooper Silas. Shut the hell up, all of you. Sounds like all the long-range Vox channels have been taken over. Anybody still wants to do your last Vox right, do it now. I am cutting off that privilege after 1 minute. Barked Sergeant Gerhardt as he supervised Lantis working on the communicator, but regardless of his efforts the same message was repeating on the Vox speaker, and it was beginning to unnerve them. Losing out on Vox War on our big day? A bad omen if you asked me, but at least they had the decency to pick a speaker with a beautiful voice. Another trooper added his voice. I don't know about you guys, but this war ain't feeling right for me from the get-go, chipped in a low voice. It was from Ignathum, the quiet but capable person in the squad who seldom spoke, but when he did, people listened. What do you mean, Ignathum? Silas asked. That got everyone's attention. Ignathes eyed his squadmates for a while before talking. That day, I saw it. On one of the fights when they attacked, they had sororitas with them. Trooper Ignatham. Sergeant Gerhardt gave his warning, but it was too late. Is that true, Sarge? The sororitas are with the governor. So that is not a rumor? That message even got the Inquisition involved now. No one in their right mind would mention the Inquisition if it ain't real. Lately, there was a rumor going around that the initially neutral sororitas had shown up alongside the forces of the incumbent governor in the civil conflict. Nusquam was a civilized imperial world that held the seat of the planetary governor as the highest office and other branches of the Imperium as ruling subsidiaries. As such, the fact that a whole order minoris was here despite the world not being under the direct control of the ecclesiarchy was a rarity indeed. Even so, like the rest of the Imperium, members of Adeptus Sororitas were widely viewed as symbols of piousness on Nusquam. The order held enough sway on the public's opinion, and their recent support towards Catalina had been largely downplayed by Kythan's faction. But this suppression could not keep going on for long, which was part of the reasons they had pushed for a swift conclusion. Once Kythan held the office, there was little the Sororitas could do as against the host of the planet but to file protests, but such actions might as well be spitting at the sea. For the common soldiers on the planet, though, the Sororitas enjoyed an idol-like status with their reputation of being well-trained for combat, zealous ferocity in battle, and access to usage of iconic war gear like power armor and bolters. That was why a blanket gag order was in place forbidding the common troopers from discussing the matter in an attempt to prevent it from eroding the troops' morale. Specialist Lantis, turn the communicator off if you can't switch around that message. The rest of you shut it, or I will be forced to dash. Sergeant Gerhardt was dropping another warning when the Torox transport suddenly came to a halt. Losing his balance, Gerhardt toppled to the side. A loud thud was heard as he banged his head on the inside of the truck with his prized Cadian pattern helmet. Throne, damn it. Driver, what the hell are you doing? The sudden stop had made the big man divert his wrath while the rest of the squad kept their silence as they knew better than to be on the bad side of the sergeant when he got really pissed. Sorry, sir, but the indomitable fury has suddenly stopped moving. The driver replied. That got the rest of the squad to check on the leading Baneblade super heavy tank from their visual slit. Yeah, she has stopped moving, Sarge. What the? Suddenly there was a loud thud on the roof of the Torox and an explosion of sorts happened. Everyone flinched at the sound and someone cried out, "We are being shelled." The whole squad panicked and expected massive explosions to follow, but none came. In the eerie silence inside the compartment, a constant popping sound could be heard outside of their transport while the same message asking them to choose wisely was repeating itself. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects. Gerhardt muttered to himself with a shaken voice for a while before finally turning to his subordinate to vent his frustration. Specialist Lantis. Didn't I order you to turn that thing off? I did turn it off, Sarge. Lantis replied meekly while adjusting his spectacles with a trembling hand. Sarge, you need to take a look at this. Ignatham's calm voice had everyone's attention. Gerhardt took a look at what the trooper was indicating, and he gasped. What in the name of, the sergeant said while opening the rear hatch of the vehicle. Outside the vehicle, everything on the ground level was covered with a layer of white smoke. Above them, some unknown flyers flying in formations could be seen. Sarge, I am afraid to ask, but have we been bamboozled? This does not look like an easy victory for me. Sela asked. Where are our flyers? Why does it look like they have total air superiority over us? Over their head up in the sky, a few flyers could be spotted flying, and the same message they had heard repeatedly inside their vehicle could be heard reverberating across the field. Are those the Nuntius Hailers? Those things only ever came out during special big church events. So we are really going up against the Sisters and the Inquisition? This is madness. Meanwhile, inside the leading Baneblade Indomitable Fury, Lord General Luther von Norden, Supreme Field Commander of the Northern Grand Army, was hit by a grim realization something was really amiss with the development of this battle. First off, communications between his army with the rear elements was suddenly lost. No one from his battle group could make contact with the headquarters nor rearguard General Boren. Then their long-range Vox network seemed to be hijacked, broadcasting the same repeating message asking them to surrender. Their enemy had even bothered to send Laud Hailer flyers to bombard them with the same message, signaling their loss of air superiority. Just moments ago they were shelled by artillery rounds. Thankfully those were just smokescreen shells, but the shelling was so accurate he had a distinct feeling they were being taunted. With the realization that the whole army could be moving into a trap, he ordered the battle group to a grinding halt. Sure enough, after his battle formation halted their movement, Forward observers reported the path in front was hit by the next wave of smoke bombardment, rendering everything in a blanket of white smoke and confirming his hunch that their default route had been anticipated. Have we been totally outmaneuvered? Luther could not fathom such a thing happening at this very moment. Catalina's side had never displayed such expertise, and Kythan's camp had had the upper hand on almost every engagement until now. Lord General, his right-hand man, a junior officer, approached him gingerly, breaking his thought process. Someone is on the line and wishes to talk to you. Who? She claims to be a daughter of the Emperor, currently representing the combined will of Adeptus Sororitas, Adeptus Mechanicus, and the Holy Inquisition in supporting Lady Catalina. Talk? Huh? The Lord General's eyes narrowed. That means they do not possess enough leverage to deal with all of us yet and wish to buy time. Have you all worked out where the smoke shells originated from yet? My lord, from the evidence so far, we believe the shells originated from our back line. So, General Boren has betrayed us, or somehow Catalina's forces actually took over his command. At any rate, they could not have sent more than an elite strike force to do the job. I agreed on that assessment, Lord. Your orders. Send Colonel Arnold's 144th Mobile Infantry Division to find out what is happening back there. Make sure we take back control of our artillery battalions. If found to be at fault, General Boren does not have to survive. Affirmative. Something fishy is happening. Without stable back-end support, dragging this engagement will be a great disadvantage to us. Prepare to move the whole battle group forward. We are diverting from the original plan and going straight in. In the meantime, let me talk to whoever this person is. I turned off the communication line and let out an inward sigh. It was too optimistic to think we could have resolved all this without further bloodshed. So the talks broke down, and it seemed like we would be doing this the hard way. Lord General Luther von Norden was not intimidated by us dropping smokescreens on his forces one bit. The general had also refused my request for holographic communication, thus my halo trick was denied, and we negotiated via voice only. As a result, I did not have much to work with on him. From his profile, I could see the man was a fierce-looking, hawkish individual who had spent his entire adult life in the military, climbing his way through the ranks with a combination of competency and a tireless work ethic. Background-wise, he came from a family with deep ties to the established noble houses of the planet and was a distant uncle to Kai then, Catalina's half-brother. Luther was proving harder to deal with than I expected. But then again, I knew for the Lord General, this war was more than a civil dispute, it was personal. From the information we dug out on him, it was widely known decades earlier Luther had lost his beloved and only son in what was a messy love affair that had involved Catalina. The general had hidden that grudge well, but apparently it had secretly manifested into his life's mission to bring the governor down. Now that he had the one and only chance to see it into fruition, no amount of reasoning could sway his resolve. Even the fact that Kythan von Cleus had retreated from the theater of war did not seem to bother him much. It might even have the opposite effect, since that meant Luther literally answered to no one but himself on this battlefield, with close to 500,000 troops and a lot of battle tanks under his command. From the brief talk, I had the impression he was convinced either our actions were some form of trickery or we did not really have the means to stop his forces. At this point, nothing short of the Emperor himself in his full glory with a whole great crusade fleet appearing in the sky will change his current course of action. This stubborn old geezer is going to get a lot of people killed. The same rigid military structure that had enabled us to take over the rear line of the rebel forces now prevented us from convincing the bulk of the main force to surrender. Shivering slightly from the accumulated strain of ceaselessly using my ability to manage the operation, I gathered my strength before resolving myself for the inevitable big battle that would result in mass casualties for the rebels. But better the rebels die than dragging the safety of me and my associates together with the future of this planet down the drain. I am sorry, a lot of you guys will have to die a wasteful death. Crypto, you heard what he said. I sent. Affirmative. The calculus did put the odds of convincing him to surrender at less than 10%. The general's response is within the predicted parameters, as logic and loyalty are no longer his primary operational motive. Are you happy you can test your toys now? Emotional gratification unnecessary. Data collection and live test of the experimental approach to warfare is the priority. Usage of the term toys is incorrect for the hardware involved. The Dominus answered without skipping a beat. So is everything ready for the battle? Affirmative. Hold on. I am receiving a vox from Inquisitor Thorn. It appears to be urgent. Patching him in. A system chime sounded, signaling Thabra's participation. Dominus. Has the engagement with the rebel main army started yet? Can you get SYRINE in here too? The Inquisitor's voice barged into our virtual communication. Something about the way he sounded made me realize this could be serious. I am here, Inquisitor. We are just about to make contact with the rebel main force. What is the urgent news? SYRINE? Good. You must listen to what I am about to say carefully. We have just uncovered important leads to the Chaos cult working behind the scene. I believe they are planning to use a blasphemous ritual together with an ancient artifact to summon powerful warp entities over. Oh, this is serious, seriously bad. Chaos cultists cooking up long-term schemes to bring down worlds is totally a thing in this universe. I was so busy preparing for the war I had totally overlooked the very reason Thabris was on this planet, chasing insidious chaos cults. To my understanding, this particular ritual utilizes the recently departing souls who had died of violent deaths to fuel its potency. In short, everyone on the planet involved in this civil war is but a sacrificial pawn in their scheme. If possible, do not engage the rebel army until this is resolved. Stunned by the news, I took another look at the tactical overview and watched in horror as the Grand Rebel Army started moving again. This time, they were going straight to our defensive line. Chapter 28 Grand Trap. An emergency virtual meeting was held just before the biggest engagement with the rebel army happened. Holographic busts of all the important people were arranged in a circle as the urgent discussion went down on virtual space. Chaos cultists? And a blasphemous ritual utilizing departing souls as fuel to open up a warp portal and summon demons on my planet. Catalina voiced her disbelief. The level of shock she experienced shattered the joy she had experienced earlier today. The ritual site appears to have quite a formidable defense with void shield generators. Orbital bombardment won't work. Inquisitor Thorn had tapped into the rapid response force we had reserved for the renegade Astartes to deal with the cultists. He and his team are heading towards the site as we speak. But the target destination is quite a distance away. It will take 1.5 standard Terran hours just for the strike force to reach there. Cryptor notified. So, this was why my lady was pushing for a peaceful resolution. Your boundless foresight and wisdom astounds us, praised Canonist D. Dinah with a bow, and the rest of the Palatines followed suit. But I was feeling unwell, and we had no time for these Sasuga shenanigans, so I quickly and lightly brushed off the compliments and brought the topic back to its course. We are but moments away from engaging the main rebel army, and as outrageous as it sounds, our main priority now is to scale down the potential casualties for both sides before the ritual is dealt with. Fortunately, I had brainstormed with Dominus Cycle before on such matters, and we had come up with some solutions to minimize casualties on both sides. I summarized. I will have to respectfully disagree on that statement. Surprisingly, Cryptora refuted me and he continued, almost all of these solutions were solely pushed by you in one of our much earlier discussions. I take no credit for such extreme approaches to non-lethal resolutions. Bless the Omnisia, these could now be applied to our current situation, largely thanks to your foresight. His words brought me another round of applause from the sisters. Even some of the Nusquamis were joining in, making the meeting even more awkward for me. I did come up with some outrageous ideas in my naive attempt to save lives in our previous discussions, never expecting them to be implemented for real. Cryptora continued, at any rate, I had taken the liberty of putting down some of those ideas into executable formations and engagement protocols just in case we have use of it, like now. Fortunately, our forces are already in place and ready. We just have to change the method of engagement. With cooperation from you all, we could in theory massively cut down casualties until the heretical ritual is dealt with. The Dominus then started distributing the detailed information of his plan, again doing the real work here. Very well, let's do this, I declared, and the emergency virtual meeting concluded in high spirits. Soon after the meeting right in the afternoon, the Grand Northern Army finally made contact with our forces. Banking on their advantage of dictating the engagement and having better trained battle tank companies, the rebels tried to push through the defensive line by concentrating their forces in one spot. Responding to this, we sprang our trap. First, we bombarded the whole area with smokescreen shells from our artillery units, rendering visibility on the field close to nothing for a while, slowing their progress to a crawl. Cryptora then started to conduct his massive experimental warfare on the rebels. Taking full advantage of our total air superiority, he deployed thousands of experimental probes from the air and had them swarmed over the rebels' tank formation. Utilizing sophisticated Auspex readings, he was able to pinpoint the position of each and every tank in the rebels' formation and started detonating probes on their tracks. immobilizing half of the spearhead tanks and leaving the rest in an awkward position on whether to press forward or leave their compatriots behind. Next, he proceeded on doing the same with all the outlying vehicles of the battle formation, effectively attempting to trap the whole army with their own immobilized vehicles. Finally, a portion of his probe swarm was dedicated to taking out the mobile artillery in the rebel army to deny them their indirect fire capabilities. The small number of mobile artillery tanks in the rebel army group, be it Basilisk, Colossus, Griffin, Manticore, Medusa, or Wyvern tanks, were all hunted down and had their primary weapon disabled by a suicidal probe detonating at a critical point. A few unfortunate incidents did occur as some of the artillery tanks were obliterated outright when a probe was detonated too close to their ammunition. I winced internally every time one of these rare cases occurred. Alarmed by this unforeseen development, the rebels tried their best to shoot down the probes. Soon tracers of small arms fire were observed from their formation as they tried their best to bring the probes down. Good luck with that with all the smoke and the chaotic situation, and that was before taking the agility of the probes into account. Cryptor then took advantage of the chaos to sneak in his sophisticated spy probes and attach them to the turrets of the leading Baneblade super heavy tanks. With my authority ability, we easily bypassed their security protocols and managed to covertly tap into all their communications. When the frontmost elements of the rebel tank formations finally met with the defenders, more troubles awaited them. Knowing exactly where they would strike, we had placed Catalina's most capable tank hunter units in entrenched positions to meet their assault head-on. Units of Mechanicus Onager Dune crawlers armed with neutron lasers were present at key areas to provide accurate fire support, immobilizing tank after tank with their pinpoint accuracy. In this clash, we would make a point of immobilizing and destroying the primary weapons of the first few rows of enemy tanks with precision fire from our units and suicide probes, creating a barrier of lame duck units at the forefront of the rebel armor spearhead to further buy time. A makeshift system had been set up, enabling Cryptor to share targeting data acquired from the Mechanicus sophisticated sensors with all friendly units. Such features enabled the Governor's forces to operate optimally even under the heavy cover of smokescreens, firing anti-tank rounds at the maximum distance to disable more rebel tanks. With me keeping tabs of their command chatter and providing a god's point of view over the entire battlefield to direct resources, we were able to outgun the rebels despite the majority of our forces being less capable in actual combat performance, putting up a fierce fight against the rebels' armor advances with all our stacked-up advantages. Meanwhile, the rebels struggled to bring their superior tank numbers and gunnery to bear. Working in very difficult conditions of low visibility due to smoke screens and suffering from constant communication errors thanks to me messing with their short-range Vox via spy probes scattered in the field. Soon the rebels' armor assaults were hindered by an ever-increasing number of immobilized and disabled vehicles. Any hostile vehicle that could break through our lines of fire would be visited by one of Cryptor's suicide probes and had its track blown off, halting any tangible progress. Then to top it all off, in the chaotic mess, Cryptor exploited our total air superiority again to drop a massive EMP bomb on the rebels' battle formation, carefully calculating the area of effect so the electromagnetic pulse would mostly hit hostile units. Contrary to what a typical sci-fi movie would have you believe, most military hardware was shielded against such an attack, but the Dominus was aiming to cripple their targeting systems and add further woes to their already dire situation. According to the very first plan Cryptor had suggested, this would be the point where we dropped all the artillery rounds to finish the stranded rebels off, but we were not helping that dark ritual today. The glorious combat Lord General Luther was hoping for had become a quagmire of impossible scenarios. All these actions so far provided the perfect cover for the bulk of Catalina's reserve forces to quietly deploy further outside of the combat area. Exploiting our total control over the information the rebels were receiving on the battlefield, we were able to slowly encircle Luther's army without him noticing. After about an hour or so of non-stop grueling tank battle where we were busy disabling hostile tanks while the other side was basically shooting blind, the rebels finally caught on that they were in a hopeless target situation. Anticipating they would be making their next move soon, I had my attention focused on the inside of the leading Baneblade Indomitable Fury. Despite the overall environment being noisy as heck as the inside of a tank operating on a battlefield should be, with all the sensors available and my superhuman hearing, I still managed to make out what was being said. "My lord, the latest reports are in," someone said inside the tank. "Let me see." A voice I recognized to be Luther replied. There were hints of frustration in his tone. A while later, The Lord General spoke again. What in the Emperor's name? This casualty number is no mistake? Yes, my lord. I double-checked it myself. We have fully engaged the enemy on the front, and you meant to tell me until now we have a lot more immobilized vehicles than casualties. Confirmed, it seemed to be a deliberate act of the enemy. So, what are they playing at? Are we being toyed with? There was a brief moment of uncomfortable silence before he continued with a snarl. Unacceptable. Relay my new order. Send in the forward infantry divisions for a frontal assault. The enemy should be overcompensating for anti-armor warfare. We will see if they can continue to toy with us. Yes, Lord. It was then I backed off from eavesdropping and warned the commanders of our side on the impending infantry waves. Thus the rebels switched from armored to massed infantry assault, sending waves of infantry battle formations through their immobilized vehicles to charge our defensive lines. Anticipating that, what awaited their infantry charge was an unconventional formation of sororitas in the front with massed Skitarii Rangers behind. Under the supervision of their canonists and palatines, the battle sisters were ordered not to return fire unless they were absolutely sure their shots would not kill the rebels. Before long, the rebel infantry formation reached our line like the waves of a human tsunami. It was then Cryptorer invoked the Mechanicus Protector Doctrina imperative protocol for his entire army, affecting all the Skitarii troops on the field via enhanced data tethers that were scattered across his units. The protocol temporarily buffed all the Skitarii units to enhance their already deadly marksmanship. The Rangers were soon putting their extreme gunnery skills to use, but were ordered to take only non-lethal shots. Thus another really weird battle went underway. Already outranging the standard Lost guns by a huge margin and equipped with advanced optics, the Rangers went to work, subjecting the rebel troops with pinpoint-accurate small arms fire before they even had the chance to shoot back. Each time a Ranger would fire his or her galvanic rifle, a rebel trooper would either lose a weapon or suffer a non-lethal wound to the leg or arm. The downed troopers would then be ignored, and soon a huge number of wounded or unarmed troops were reported on the front, straining resources and morale for the rebels. Those making further progress charging into the defensive lines would be met by a line of battle sisters who would not shoot back. Fighting the sororitas alone was already quite a hard sell for most of the rebel troopers. Adding to the fact that the sisters were not shooting back brought a whole new level of eeriness. Most were unnerved and refused to engage the sororitas. For those who pushed on to engage, the battle sisters' power armor and entrenched position made a mockery of their desperate efforts. Some had reported having been shot at by the sisters. However, the bolter rounds always just exploded inches from their feet, cementing the notion they were only firing warning shots, but could kill them any time if the sisters wished. While these odd standoffs were happening, the Skitarii Rangers at the back line never stopped on their assigned task, picking off weapons and delivering non-lethal blows with typical Mechanicus cold machine-like efficiency. Overhead, the Nuntius Hailers continued their flyovers, broadcasting messages asking the rebels to surrender. Such displays of dominance were soon having a catastrophic effect on the morale of the rebels, who were saddled with an increasing number of weaponless and wounded soldiers, resulting in mass surrenders in certain areas. These surrendering troops would be handled by the governor's regular units who were stationed behind the Skitarii, freeing the more elite sisters and rangers from the burden of such operations while the process was being repeated and recorded. The recorded picked feed were then displayed on the Nuntius Imagifier flyers for their flyovers, resulting in another chain reaction of surrendering across the front line. In the midst of the oddly one-sided firefight, a squad of really dedicated rebels successfully forced their way into a line of battle sisters, only to be bested by the sisters in the ensuing hand-to-hand combat, swiftly being pummeled by power armor fists and awarded with black eyes and broken noses. After that, they were then unceremoniously dragged out of the combat zone to become prisoners of war. Soon the battlefield became flooded with vox from the rebel side calling for medical aid and support. I was closely monitoring everything through all the data feeds, reacting to the action of the rebels and swiftly issuing general orders to the relevant on-field commanders while keeping tabs on the information coming out from the indomitable fury. This continued for a while until Lord General Luther von Norden's frustration reached a feverish point. Soon he had called for a Vox meeting with all his generals to decide on the next course of action. Wham! The sound of a bare fist hitting a flat surface came inside the Bane blade after an overview report was delivered. It was followed by Luther cursing out loud, by the Emperor's teeth. My lord, the rate of our men being either wounded or disarmed is worrying. This is unsustainable. The fact that most of our troops who had made contact with the enemy were left alive has severely strained our resources and morale. We are getting requests on orders with what to do with whole battalions of wounded men. Luther breathed heavily for a while before finally answering, "It is fine. We have reserves." "What about the key objectives? Any progress?" The weakest points of the enemy defenses had been identified. Finally, some good news. "How's the reorganization of our operational vehicles coming along?" "On that front, we will be ready soon. Of all the immobilized units, a small portion were managed to be repaired on the field." "Good. Give the orders. We will be moving out soon." "My lord, what about the wounded?" "Leave the wounded behind to continue the standoff on the stranded sectors. We are making an all-out attack with everything. That includes the left and right flank groups. We will all be pushing at the least guarded part of the enemy line." "This ends now." One of the generals communicating on their Vox network wanted to voice his opinion. "My lord, should say no more." The Lord General sharply rebuked before his subordinate could finish a statement. "It is decided. This time I will lead with the indomitable fury at the front. The left and right flank groups will join with the same example." The intensity of his voice made me wince, and suddenly I found myself grabbing the podium to stabilize myself as another wave of dizziness hit me again. Behind me came the surprised gasps of Wellmana and Verita. My condition had deteriorated until the point I could no longer hide my weakened state from them. My strength and focus were rapidly slipping away. Meanwhile, the Mad General was hell-bent on sending his entire army on a desperate mission for personal vendetta and would be starting his suicide run soon. Chapter 29, Beautiful World. The long hours of constant strain had finally taken their toll. My body was starting to fail at the worst possible time. The world felt like spinning just when the rebel army was about to launch their most critical all-out assault. I gritted my teeth as new waves of dizziness assaulted my senses. Overwhelmed, I almost collapsed to the ground but found myself being held up by Verita. It was great to have a medical professional nearby. "SYRINE, the fluctuation of your health vitals are reaching unacceptable levels. I have taken the liberty of directing the encirclement operation. Please stand down." Cryptor advised, finally breaking his silence on my condition, which I was sure he was aware of. "Yes, please take over on that, but I am not standing down. The most crucial part has just begun. The Bane Blades are coming out." "Is Operation Kidnapping viable with the on-field situation?" "Yes, the conditions are viable." "Then we will push on with it. Get the elements ready." "Understood." "Lady SYRINE, you seem unwell. Please take a rest," Verita advised while helping me to stand. "No, Verita. Not now. Not when so many lives are on the line and the chance to end this is finally here." I replied with some difficulty, "I need to see this part through." "They are starting to move." All three Bane Blades appeared to be moving into frontal positions. "Are you sure you can continue?" Cryptor asked with a hint of concern. "Truth be told, I'm not sure, but this needs to be done. Verita, release me. After this, I will take a rest," I ordered, and the sister reluctantly complied. After steadying myself, I dove back into the god's point of view again and saw the full offensive coming. An impressive amount of vehicles and troops were moving towards our line. Further out, a huge bulk of our forces that were deployed further away earlier were now following Cryptor's directive and started coming around to encircle the whole rebel army. This was the final phase of our grand trap. Now we just needed to kidnap their leaders and box them in. I watched intently as all three battle groups of the rebel army started moving forward, each battle group led by a Bane Blade flanked by many battle tanks. They had learned their lesson. This time their formation had teams of mixed infantry squads and fighting vehicles acting as forward elements while the tank cruised at combat speed right behind them. I even saw an Ogren leading one of the infantry formations. There was no avoiding mass casualties if we directly clashed with such solid formations. Meanwhile, smokescreen shells and tricks were running low on our side, so it was time for my final light show and Operation Kidnapping. The basic idea was simple enough. I would try to use my abilities to stun the whole rebel army by totally overwhelming their communication network plus distracting them with my Halo light show. While that was being done, we would try to kidnap the Bane Blades and cover our act with the last supplies of our smoke screens. I had always got a soft spot for giant tanks, and Cryptor had a deep respect for venerable war machines. So it was a no-brainer for us to cook up an elaborate plot during last night's lengthy discussions to try getting the Bane Blades over intact. As a bonus, it also had the potential to sever the rebels' leadership since all their battle group leaders were using Bane Blades as mobile command centers. Due to the ritual, this part had instead become the do-or-die crucial point of the entire battle. We had the planning done in detail, however what we did not anticipate was the condition I was in when the crucial moment approached. My body was still shivering when Cryptorer dropped his update again. They are coming now. Back-end connections with all 3 Beyblades confirmed. All elements for the final light show and kidnapping stand ready. If this fails, we will have no choice but to incur massive casualties. How long do I need to keep it up once this started? About 5 minutes. Tell me when it is time. Understood. Tottering between staying awake and fainting, I was conserving my strength while waiting. After an indeterminable amount of time had passed, Cryptorer finally dropped the green light. SYRINE, it is time. Time to go. I solidified my focus and activated thought acceleration as a massive amount of command pulse burst off from me into the battlefield. I took over all the Vox networks. Next, I got ready for the final light show. Turning selfie mode on the skull probe, I relayed my visual and audio to all Nunch's Hailer and Imagifier flyers. This never failed to cringe me up, but it was necessary. Finally, I sent directives to the machine spirits of all 3 Beyblades, overriding their operators, and ordered the super heavy tanks to immediately go to their designated spots on the battlefield at maximum speed while shutting down their targeting support systems. By then, I felt so weak and had nothing prepared to say for this final act. In the back of my mind, I was thinking maybe just go in, spam my halo while scolding the rebels a bit. As I was lost in thoughts, the data load reached me, and it was so straining my vision became blurred. I realized this might actually be too much for me and panicked. Oh, this is bad. I felt like slowly being crushed by the very air around me as the data streams started to look so distant away, nothing but thunderous thuds of heartbeats in my ears. Thump, 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 thump. Too fast. How is it that my heartbeat sounded so incredibly fast? Oh, right. I have 2 hearts. Throne. I need 5 more minutes. My mind was collapsing. I felt myself clutching at straws to maintain my synapses. But we are so close. Another wave of nausea hit me like a truck, sending me dangerously close to fainting. In desperation, I bit down on my lower lip, using the sensation to fortify what was left of my concentration. Verita was shouting something nearby, but no meaning came through. My perception of time had become haywire as thought acceleration became unstable and reality started slipping away from me. 5 minutes. I need to just stay awake for 5 more minutes. What else is 5 minutes long? A walk? Wait, I can't leave the podium. A song? Where can I? Hold on. There is one here in my pendant, and its playtime is exactly 5 minutes. Working with the last ounce of strength in my coherent mind, I managed to squeeze out a command pulse. Play Beautiful World.mp3. A familiar melody started playing in my head, slowly and softly at first, but before I knew it, the song got louder and louder until it resonated throughout my warped sensory perception. It's only love. It's only love. My last bit of consciousness was clinging to the rhythm of the song like a desperate drowning sailor holding onto a piece of floating wood in a raging ocean. Lend me your strength, Sensei Yatada. That was my last thought before my consciousness finally shattered and my very existence became the song itself. Lady SYRINE. Lady SYRINE. Verita and Wellmana were trying their best but received no response. SYRINE's eyes remained shut, and she stood as still as a statue on the gigantic podium. This is not good. Is it even medically possible for her to remain standing while fainted? Wellmana asked her companion frantically, but Verita was way ahead, voxing to the support team nearby to prepare for a medical emergency, and Kira had headed out to guide the support team over. Verita had just requested further assistance on asking for a levitating stretcher when suddenly a golden halo much larger and brighter than the one they had witnessed manifested on SYRINE. As the podium became covered in holy radiance, both sisters found themselves kneeling down reflexively, and they watched in awe as the feeling of power emanating from their holy daughter continued to climb. While SYRINE had remained motionless, her halo steadily became brighter and brighter until it felt like a miniature sun. My lady. Wellmana asked but still received no response. Just as the sisters thought the events unfolding before them were unusual enough. To their utter bewilderment, every device with a speaker within their vicinity suddenly came alive, playing a strange instrumental music, and SYRINE started singing in her trance-like state. On the battlefield just moments earlier, the final assault of the rebels' forces came face to face with an eerie sight. Their enemies were where they should be in the distance, but on top of the defensive line were squadrons of hovering Nunch's Imagifier flyers with huge holograms underneath them displaying the portrait of a regal lady with her eyes closed. Undeterred by the odd formation awaiting them, the rebel army pressed forward, determined to finally have an honest fight with their enemy, and were eager to redeem themselves for all their failings today. Then the strange sight got stranger still as a blinding halo with a peculiar quality manifested on the huge holograms of the lady, with that an overwhelming presence was felt across the battlefield and an unspoken message delivered. Stand down. Your sovereign is here. The strange sight was extremely intimidating to the lesser-willed individuals while compelling subservience to those people with a stronger sense of faith. While their mileage may vary, the result was ultimately the same. Most rebel troopers stopped marching forwards and many even knelt down. Even seasoned tank commanders were unconsciously putting their war machines to a halt at the sight of it. Then the armies watched in disbelief as the lady in the giant hologram started to sing. A strange but pleasant melody started to play across the battlefield. It dominated all the channels on the long-range Vox, it took over the short-range Vox, it blared in the confines of combat vehicles, and it resonated in the sky with all the Nuntius hailers broadcasting the song from high up. It's only love. It's only love. Mashimo Nagai Hatatsadake, Kanao Nara. The song went on and on, singing in a language no one understood but sounded strangely nostalgic. Close to 1 million souls watched and listened in stunned silence as what could only be described as the largest open-air solo performance ever happened right before them during a war. Beautiful world, beautiful boy. Meanwhile, back at the podium of wires, Verita and Wellmano were freaking out as SYRINE continued to sing her otherworldly song. What is going on? Why is she singing and what language is that? It was Verita's turn to ask questions as she pestered the scholar about the unfathomable sight before them. This sounds like ancient Terran? But it seemed mixed. I don't really know. Wellmano was totally flustered and could not make any sense of what was going on. Little did she know at that exact moment the same song was permeating on the whole battlefield. Back on the battlefield, the lady in the holograms continued to sing with her eyes closed. She was gently swaying to the rhythm of her song, her voice soothing, and the sight of her radiant halo had a pacifying effect, making people instinctively lower their weapons. People on both sides of the battlefield had their eyes glued to the unusual event, while those further away from the spectacular sight were mesmerized by the unusual song echoing everywhere. Soon, no one was fighting, but the battle formations had already been locked in motion, so the encirclement of the rebel army continued. During the brief surreal period when the song lasted, only a small portion of the rebel forces were aware that their Bane blades had suddenly broken ranks from their respective battle groups. They watched in awe as the super-heavy tanks charged at full cruising speed straight into the enemy lines under the cover of suspiciously well-timed smoke screens, leaving their confused comrades behind with little way to notify the rest of the army on what was going on. Meanwhile, inside the indomitable fury, Lord General Luther was experiencing a world of trouble. Moments ago, his Bane blade was suddenly moving on its own accord and had been pushing forward with maximum speed towards the enemy while his contact with the outside world was totally cut off as the strange song had taken over all the Vox network. Unable to contact anyone. It is all the same song on all the channels. The communication officer lamented. I have no control. The driver could be heard yelling as the indomitable fury continued moving forward. My lord, the main turret is turning 180 by itself. At this rate, we won't even have the main gun to protect ourselves. Another crew member yelled. After watching the ridiculous events unfolding for a while, Luther snapped back to his senses and quickly went to the engine room himself. The Lord General was looking for the Mechanicus engineer who was dedicated to the service of indomitable fury. If there was anyone who could bring back the control of his tank, it would be one of the cocks. Zelton, Luther bellowed. Receiving no response, he went into the depths of the engine room. Engineer Zelton, where are you? Down in the engine room, it was cramped, dark, and noisy as hell. The Lord General himself seldom ventured down here, and most crew members were only too happy to leave it as the engineer's sole domain. It took a while for Luther's eyes to adjust for the dimly lit space. For a moment, the Lord General was convinced his engineer had somehow disappeared until he saw a robbed figure hunched at the very corner of the engine room. The tech adept seemed transfixed on something in front of him. Zelton, throne damn it, why won't you respond? Luther crouched over and grabbed the engineer by his shoulder. It was only then the engineer seemed to realize he was not alone. My lord, Zelton stammered. My crew has lost control of the indomitable fury. What is going on with my tank? Are we being hijacked? Luther demanded. Hijack. The engineer answered dreamily until a hint of realization appeared on the still human-looking part of his face, and he quickly refuted the Lord General. No, my lord, nothing like that. Zelton replied confidently. His voice was so calm in this apparent crisis it was surprising even to the Lord General, and he demanded, What do you mean? The tank is heading towards the enemy line without control even as we speak. Get it back to our control now. I can't. Do you see this, my lord? Zelton pointed to a small glowing screen in front of him. Luther took a peek and saw nothing comprehensible to him. I see it, but nothing makes sense to me. Explain plainly and quickly. Zelton nodded and continued. I have never seen anything like it myself before, but this appears to be a genuine administrative level command coming from the outside. Meaning a higher authority is here, my lord. Someone very close to the source of omniscia is on this planet, and that person is currently giving commands to the indomitable fury. As children and disciples of the machine god, we must obey. Luther froze. So you see, the indomitable fury is not being hijacked. It is merely obeying orders from a higher authority, like children obeying their parents, soldiers obeying their general, or space marines obeying the emperor. The Lord General opened his mouth, but no words came out. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to attend to my duties. Zelton finished his explanation. He then turned towards the engine, knelt down and started kowtowing to it while chanting, O great omniscia, I hear and obey thy command. For a moment, Luther considered shooting the engine seer, but in the end decided against it. The Lord General reasoned Zelton's service will still be needed in the future after he wins the war. For now, he just needed to salvage the situation. Back at the podium of wires, the song was finally over. SYRINE immediately shut down and collapsed to the ground, sending both Verita and Wellmana into utter panic. Chapter 30-something came forth. Destinies collided, fates changed. Much earlier, when the rebels were about to make their first major push just after Inquisitor Thabris dropped his urgent warning, something unusual happened at the ritual site. Fate has it that somewhere in the Immaterium, swimming in the eternal and infinite Empyrean Sea, an ageless consciousness took notice of a faint calling originating from beyond space and time. Made by an intelligence with an understanding of the ether, there was a right type of ring to this calling. Several lesser Neverborn were already flocking to it. Like carrion flies, they loitered around the source of summoning and were licking at offerings pouring through the veil, gathering strength to pass through space-time to directly feast in that world. The arrival of the ageless consciousness startled the lesser Neverborn. Like an apex predator entering into a scene of primal feasting, its lesser kin scattered hurriedly to avoid its wrath, leaving the opening solely to it. The unknowable thing investigated the source and let a part of its impossible self sample the other side for the briefest of period and found it lacking. The calling offered the essence of blood and souls of sentient beings, but the quantity was petty and its initial offering paltry for its appetite. There were many other similar happenings which offered much more substantial rewards. Unimpressed, the consciousness decided to ignore this calling when a certain aspect of what it sampled caught its attention. There, within the myriad of information it tasted was a faint residue of a very rare type of existence, an existence which would be an anathema to its kind, one that a Neverborn would consider being its bane. Intrigued, for a moment it thought of further investigating before deciding whatever it had sensed was too weak and not worth the attention. It would hardly recoup its energy and resources. Still, it had really disliked the hint of that existence, so much so the idea of leaving it alone greatly displeased it. Kill it. Such anathema called upon itself to be erased, but the tediousness of doing it, the energy involved, and the insignificance of that existence's level of strength made it teetered on the very edge of indecisiveness. Do something about it? Leave it alone? Leave it be. No, kill it. Leave it be. Kill it. Why not both? Finally decided on its course of action, the impossible thing pushed a tiny piece of itself over the edge of space and time. It then poured its rage and displeasure into that portion of itself, and then severed it. Go forth. With wordless directive it commanded its splintered self and imbued it with just enough power to cross the veil. Seek that which displeases us and erase it from existence. Sustain thyself with sentient essence on the other side. Do not return until no sentient being can be found in that world. Its splintered self groaned in agonizing acknowledgement, and with the granted energy it crossed the threshold of eternal horizons. Homing to the source of calling, it pushed itself through the veil between dimensions, and there it would take the form of screaming tormented rage made flesh. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Throne on Terra saves us all. Inquisitor Thabris watched with unconcealed horror at the trail of carnage left by something truly massive. Along the path of wanton destruction it had left behind were the entrails of its many victims and vague chunks of human remains. Whatever it was, it had clawed its way out of an underground facility and left a hole on the side of a reinforced building the size of an Imperial Knight super heavy walker. All the heavy weapons that guarded the facility were useless against it, The gory remains of their users and the weapons trashed stayed a silent testament to that. There was even an upside-down tank on the roof that was still burning with a raging fire. Well, this is something we don't see often enough, for once the heretics purged themselves, and it looks like whatever they summoned was not under their control, nor was it on their side. Interrogator Amail's unsolicited attempt at dry humor received no response. Track that thing. Have the task force secure the perimeter. Nobody gets in or out before this is over. Thabris ordered. Not waiting for a response, he opened a Vox call to his gunship. Tasya. Sir. Have the Flame Raven switch its heavy bolter ammunition to Psy-cannon bolts. Relay to the Unrelenting Vigilance to ready the Exterminatus solution for immediate deployment. Sir. You heard me right. We have a breach. Threat level maxima. Pray we do not have to deploy it. Sir. Thabris closed the Vox and could not help himself, but muttered a silent prayer for the order he just relayed. The Emperor grants us strength. Please don't let it come to this. Then the notion that SYRINE was on the planet derailed his thought for a moment, but tried as he might, the image of her petite frame just could not size up with the level of threat they were facing. He sighed, shook his head to refocus, and turned to his retinue. Now, do any of you have any idea of where it went? That way, Sanctioned Psyker Fulton said as he pointed his staff in a direction, his eyes glowing with psychic power. It is moving fast. I can feel. It's red-hot anger. Added his partner Salih, she was shivering from what she had sensed. Why going that way? What is in that direction? Ranter asked as he tried but failed to relax his grip on the hotshot volley gun, which would not be seeing any action in this raid operation. That direction, gasped Acolyte Herlindia, but it was Thabris who finished her sentence. The way to the battlefield. Asterisk. Back on the battlefield, Lord General Luther von Norden was furious beyond words. From his point of view, his big day of triumph had been totally ruined by a never-ending amount of underhanded tricks and honorless subterfuge. As the ridiculous events unfolded one after another, accumulating to the present where the symbol of might of the Northern Grand Army was being driven away like a victim of Grand Theft Auto while his entire army was being distracted by a song. This was totally not how the Lord General had envisioned his day would turn out to be. When it became clear if Luther had stayed on the Bane Blade he would end up being kidnapped himself, the Lord General opted to climb out of the super-heavy tank and jumped off instead. The landing was harsh. Luther survived, but sprained his leg. His command squad who had followed him on the jump picked him up, and luckily they were soon being picked up by a Torox transport that was following the Bane Blade not so far behind. Suffice to say, finding their supreme commander limping in the middle of a chaotic battlefield with a singing lady as the backdrop was not how Squad Gerhardt had envisioned their day would turn out to be. After getting the Luther and his command squad inside, Squad Gerhardt's Torox turned back towards their combat line. Passing through formations of tanks and troops who had stopped moving forward with its inside cramped up with the extra personnel and a gray-faced Lord General. Soon after that the song ended, the Vox network suddenly went back to normal again, and another chaotic hell broke loose as the absurdity of the battle situation became apparent to all. First, all three Bay Blades of the rebel army had been hijacked. Obeying an unknown directive, the super-heavy tanks went to their designated spot and proceeded to shut down after arriving. 2 out of 3 battle group commanders were still inside their tank when the Battle Sisters came knocking with melta-guns. Both the kidnapped commanders surrendered in the following standoff. Meanwhile, the news of SYRINE fainting sent a shockwave in Catalina's camp. Cryptorer took over as the overall commanding figure, but without SYRINE's authority ability they no longer held total dominance over the Vox network, allowing the rebels to finally utilize their Vox communication to some degree again. But what awaited them was a tsunami of bad news. The endless calls for medical aid, weapons and supplies, coupled with urgent reports of being surrounded by all sides, flooded their Vox as the encircling forces were finally being spotted. Evidently most troopers in the rebel camp had seen enough. Even the most tactically challenged soldier had realized their opposition was showing them a tremendous amount of mercy and restraint. When the holographic image and recordings of their battle group commanders surrendering to the Sororitas appeared in the air, the fighting will of the smaller battle groups fell apart, and their next highest-ranking officers soon declared their surrender. In the biggest battle group at the center, cracks were appearing, with troops stationed at the outermost layers silently slipping away to escape or surrender. As this battle was considered to be a civil dispute involving no Astra Militarum regiments, no commissars were present to go around shooting fleeing soldiers, and soon there was an exodus of surrendering or fleeing troops. Some of the fleeing troops escaped to the path they came from, squeezing through the tiny gaps between Catalina's forces before they could complete their encirclement. since not incurring casualties was their primary objective at that moment. The governor's troops let the disorganized fleeing rebels pass through the gaps uncontested. To Luther's credit, a sizable portion of the most elite and die-hard bunch of the rebel army had stayed with him as the encirclement was being completed. Surrounded on all sides with no way of escaping, it was a last stand, and soon a talk between the two sides was being held to discuss terms. Premonition. Something had arrived, something huge. An angry, twisted thing. A thing that should not have existed in this world. Its existence should not have been possible, but a price was paid. Be warned, it is here to seek you out. You, yes, you with their anathema's bloodline. Now an equal or greater price must be paid to see it gone, or this world of man will die. Again, you are its target and the key to its banishment. I regained consciousness. The first thing I heard was Verita berating someone. She was sounding like a pissed-off girlfriend on a messy breakout, but that was so contradictory to my mental image of her. Verita. I called out. My voice sounded weak, surprising even myself. I opened my eyes and was immediately blinded by the bright medical light shining down at me. It made me reflexively raise my hand to block the illuminations. Someone gasped and grabbed my hand. It was Wellmana. Verita. Lady SYRINE has woken up. Wellmana, where am I? Help me up. No. You need to stay down. She popped into my view, her face full of concerns. No, get me up. The war, what happened to the war? And the thing. A cold chill went down my spine as the premonition I felt during my delirium state surfaced. Thanks to your song, the last I heard from the front line was that the war is being wrapped up. Wellmana answered reverently. Song? I was confused. Oddly enough, the level of respect coming from her to me seemed to have gone up a notch. Why is this happening after my shameful performance of fainting on the most critical battle? Lady SYRINE. Verita came running to me as Wellmana was helping me to sit up. My lady, is it true? I have tried to verify with the quartermaster of the fortress, but is it true you have not eaten a single meal since you're staying at the fortress? Meal? I was stumped for a moment before remembering I never once felt hungry and was being swamped by the never-ending amount of meetings ever since the start of my lodging at the fortress. Now that I think about it, I hardly even drank a sip of water. No, I have not eaten anything at the fortress. Verita choked on her breath upon hearing my answer, but before she could say anything more, a skull probe that had been silently hovering nearby became active and floated in front of me. SYRINE? My princess. Are you operational? It was Cryptor. I held my hand up at Verita and then pointed at the probe that shut down her impending berating. Crypto. Sorry I fainted. What happened while I was out? I have good news and bad news. Good news first. Your plan worked. We got all 3 Bane blades and there were little casualties. The majority of the fighting had stopped and still no signs of the renegade Astartes. That concludes the good news. I gulped. Please continue. Now the bad news. Inquisitor Thorn arrived at the ritual site, finding only it in ruins with dead cultists. A high-threat level warp entity had come through, and it had already left the site. While the Inquisitor did not inform me of this, but I know he had deemed its threat level to be serious enough to order his ship to prepare for exterminatus. Wait, what? What came through? By the Inquisitor's request, I had some of my reconnaissance assets tailing it now. Sending to you field imaging now. It is heading towards the center of the battlefield as we speak. An image popped up in my vision, confirming my dread. There amongst the landscape, flying at incredible speed, was a gigantic horned humanoid entity with leathery wings, a bloodthirster, probably the angrier type. But why? Didn't we cut down the bloodshed to a very low level with the actions we had taken? And why was it in black color? A greater demon in the physical realm. Whatever it entails, I was guessing it was not as simple as shooting it down like in the video game. The very existence of this being was already defying the natural law of the universe. Crypto, how powerful is this thing? Can we send in mass soldiers and tanks to grind it down? Regarding that question, I had tried backtracking its path from the ritual site and found this. Relaying recorded pict feed to you now. Another vision popped up in my view. It seemed to be from the point of view of a skull probe. At first, I could not tell what I was seeing. It was as if my brain was refusing to acknowledge the ridiculous sight. After a short while, like a switch being turned on, I saw the vision as what it was, a scene of pure carnage, the aftermath of some uber butchery. It was a field completely stained red and black with blood. Chunks of what appeared to be human parts, broken bones and random innards could be seen littering everywhere, accompanied by a sea of burning wrecks. The level of violence needed to create this scenery was borderline satirical. Something was making a statement. From the clues gathered on site, This would be the 144th Mobile Infantry Division of the Rebel Army led by a Colonel Arnold. Cryptor continued to explain as the view on the field of carnage moved to a particular spot, focusing on a pile of splattered flesh. This appears to be the deceased colonel. The identification tag and what was left of the lower jaw is a match with the dental records. With this, we can deduce conventional troops and tactics might be totally ineffective against this warp spawn. I was speechless. My survey of the site had also uncovered another interesting fact. The warp spawn appeared to be gaining strength, as evidence suggests the level of blunt trauma force applied to the troops was steadily increasing after the initial contact from this area. Cryptor continued to explain away, but my mind was already tuning out, looking at the larger picture and its implications. This thing was gaining strength by slaughtering people. If left alone, it will just continue gathering power from all the killings. As it does so, it might even summon more of its kin to escalate the slaughtering. My mind went to the billions of people here, the psychic beacon, and the incoming ships. Suddenly, I saw nothing but a literal sea of blood. My blood ran cold. I shivered. This thing might be the end of us all. What am I supposed to do? Run away? We can still run, right? Leave this planet, leave the beacon, leave the people. Then I remembered the combined souls of all the people I saw in that sea of wishes and my pledge to the sisters. The premonition I experienced earlier came back to me like lightning. You are its target and the key to its banishment. Damn it. Throne damned it. I had made up my mind. Crypto. Yes, omniscient princess. I await your directive. Please send me the list of deployable secret weapons you are willing to depart for the final gambit of this venture. We will see if the situation is salvageable from there. It could be a hard sell, but using older toys to trade for shiny new ones should be a tempting prospect even for famous hoarders like them, and I was sure the Archdominus was keeping a few cards hidden. So I waited for the reply. Very well. And please get me a fast ride to the front line. I need to pick up my sword from Canoness Dinah. Understood. Finally, have as many forces as possible under your command heading to it right now. We will need all the firepower we can get to light that thing up like the Emperor's Day Parade.